do I have?
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama, this is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller. Today, the Federal Monitor is overstepping its bounds in oversight of the UAW. Nigeria's workers secure a higher minimum wage. Trump attacks the UAW, and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show, we've got a phone number and the line is open. You can call 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave us a voicemail throughout the week, and we might respond to it on the next program. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, TVLR.fm. We are also on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, Facebook, and Twitter, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, so if you want to make a one-time or recurring monthly contribution to the program, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. We also have another round of our logo caps sitting in my garage, so if you would like me to ship one to you, you can do that. You can purchase a hat on our store. That's tvlr.fm/store. They are $35 plus shipping. And finally, if you are a member of a union, then you can think about getting your local to sponsor the show. We could not do this without the support of organized labor, so you can reach out to us for more details on that if you are interested.
And let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WMMT, or through your favorite podcast app. And we are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. As most of you know, we are not media professionals, just some diehard union brothers who want to get the labor message out to a bigger audience. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you're a loyal fan or first-time listener. We appreciate you spending some time with us this morning.
And with that out of the way, here's what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to from July the 12th to July the 19th in new union campaigns. Majority of housekeeping workers at a Hyatt Hotels location in Arlington, Virginia have signed union cards with Unite Here and are asking the company to recognize their union. Community supporters and union members with the Northern Virginia Labor Federation are supporting the workers and demanding management stop union busting with a solidarity picket on Saturday, July 27th. Efforts are underway at Ultium Cells in Spring Hill, Tennessee, to collect union authorizations cards with the United Auto Workers. Metropolitan District 1199 D.C. is attempting to raid a unit of 100 workers at Unity Healthcare in Washington, D.C., who are currently represented by the Union of American Physicians and Dentists. 35 workers at Hyatt Regency Crystal City in Arlington, Virginia, filed a petition to hold a union election with Unite Here, Local 25. 5 workers at IKEA in Ponce, Puerto Rico, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW. 33 workers at Piedmont Athens Regional Medical Center in Athens, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Union of Operating Engineers, IUOE, Local 926. 31 workers at Kentucky Power in Pikeville, Kentucky, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 978. 22 workers at Appalachian Power in Charleston, West Virginia, filed a petition to hold a union election with IBEW, CW Local 978 as well. In campaign updates, Teamsters Local 41 rallied in Smithville, Missouri to demand that the local cannabis dispensary drop its claim that its employees, who have petitioned for an election from the NLRB, are agricultural workers and thus ineligible for NLRA protections. In election results, 27 workers at Corporacion Sanos in Caguas, Puerto Rico, voted across all 4 bargaining units against unionization with the ULEES. 22 workers at Division 5 LLC in Hickory, North Carolina, withdrew their petition for a union election with the Iron Workers. 89 workers at Sibelco in Bakersville, North Carolina, withdrew their petition for unionization with the United Mine Workers of America. 57 workers at Triple S Salute in San Juan, Puerto Rico, voted in favor of unionization with the Unidos Trabajando por la Salud, United Working for Health. 10 workers at AT&T Mobility in Tampa, Florida, withdrew their petition for unionization with the Communication Workers of America, CWA. In settlements, grievances, and unfair labor practices, friend of the show McKenna Schuler has a detailed report in the Orlando Weekly about heat illness among workers at Disney World in Orlando, centering an incident where one worker fainted, could not find, and couldn't work the rest of his shift, with Disney refusing to pay for the rest of that shift. According to a new academic study evaluating a decade's worth of federal data, 100 car trains that are trains with 100 cars are 11% more likely to derail than two 50-car trains, right? And 200 car trains are 24% more likely to derail than 4 50-car trains, right? So the upshot of that is the more cars that you have on the train, the more likely it is to derail. In strikes and bargaining updates, the International Longshoremen's Association, which represents longshore workers on the Gulf and East Coasts, said that they are prepared to strike in October when their contract expires if nothing changes. The international president said that they will, quote, not entertain discussions of contract extensions, nor are they, quote, interested in any help from outside agencies, including the Biden administration. Costco Teamsters in Norfolk, Virginia are taking a strike vote. Pensions are a major sticking point in the contract negotiations. The National Staff Organization, NSO, sanctioned the National Education Association, NEA, for locking out its union staff. United Steelworkers members at Bluebird in Georgia were joined by Acting Labor Secretary Julie Sue and Georgia AFL-CIO President Yvonne Brooks to celebrate their contract win. The UAW sent a notice to its Stellantis members about some of the controversies at the center of the new probe by the Federal Monitor, making it seem more and more likely that the probe is BS. Kansas City nurses, unionized with National Nurses United, held 2 informational pickets at an HCA hospital protesting the hospital's refusal to meet demands in negotiations. Members of the Communication Workers of America, CWA, employed by Universal Cable Holdings, LLC, part of Altus USA, reached a tentative agreement that includes a 7.69% wage increase over the 3-year term of the contract. In political and legislative updates, the Middle Tennessee Democratic Socialists of America eliminated $1 million of medical debt for Tennesseans from their successful Burn Debt Not Books fundraiser. WPLN, which is Nashville's NPR affiliate, had a construction worker safety feature, including an interview with an organizer from the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, IUPAT. Congressional Democrats in the House have asked repeatedly that they have a hearing on child labor, but Virginia Fox, chair of the House Committee on Education and the Workforce, has refused. Railroad Workers United, which is a cross-craft caucus of rail workers, published a white paper on public rail ownership. We'll be talking to the author of the paper on the show. The Brotherhood of Maintenance Way and Rail Employees, one of the Teamsters rail affiliates, blasted the congressional Republicans who want to cut the budget of the Railroad Retirement Board by 21%. Officials broke ground last week in Raleigh, North Carolina, on construction of a new passenger rail line along an existing freight rail corridor between Raleigh and Richmond, Virginia. The construction is being funded by a $1.1 billion grant from the federal government, plus 20% matching funds from Amtrak and the North Carolina Department of Transportation. I believe this should be over the $35 million threshold that mandates project labor agreements, so it would be interesting to read about that, but I can't find anything about a project labor agreement on this project. Alabama public employee health insurance boards are sounding the alarm about coming deficits and trying to lay the groundwork to increase costs for state workers. No mention of trying to defray the costs without placing extra burdens on state employees. The Madison County Board of Education approved over $43 million for the construction of a new school. Alabama does not have a Davis-Bacon law or project labor agreement mandates, so workers on the new construction site will not have those wage and safety protections. St. Pete City Council in Florida are considering a vote on repealing ordinances requiring contractors on public projects to employ apprentices, disadvantaged workers, and pay responsible wages. 7 of 10 states with the lowest quality of life are in the South, according to CNBC. Birmingham City Council passed a resolution endorsing a ceasefire in Gaza. The Missouri Worker Center criticized Teamster President Sean O'Brien's praise of Josh Hawley, noting that Hawley does not support the Warehouse Worker Protection Act and opposed raising Missouri's minimum wage. In response to the signs on the floor of the RNC convention calling for mass deportation now, which came only one day after O'Brien's appearance and praise for the ephemeral, quote, pro-labor conservatism, the AFL-CIO noted that 1 in 5 American workers are immigrants. They also released a project analyzing the impacts of Project 2025 on workers. The National Nurses United endorsed Cori Bush for re-election, and after a terrible report on worker safety at Amazon on Prime Day, which showed that something like 1 in 2 workers sustained some injury during that day, the Teamsters redoubled their calls to pass the Warehouse Worker Protection Act. Josh Hawley, Sean O'Brien's buddy, has not endorsed it. In internal union affairs, at-large Teamsters Vice President John Palmer, formerly the Southern Region Vice President and a member of the International Executive Board and former member of the Teamsters for a Democratic Union, announced that he is running for president against Sean O'Brien in 2026, excoriating both O'Brien and the Teamsters for a Democratic Union for their failure to speak out. If we missed anything, let us know, tvlr.fm/contact, and we'll include it on next week's Roundup. We're going to take a break and be right back to break down some of the stuff about the new, quote-unquote, investigations into the UAW from the Federal Monitor. Stay tuned. Benefit Architects has proudly supported union members in union-made products for over 35 years. If you are a federal employee and an AFGE member, you're eligible for hundreds of dollars in money-saving benefits, including group life insurance, dental insurance, and AFLAC insurance. Additionally, if you're a union member but don't work for the federal government, you can still qualify for several of these money-saving policies. So give Tate Cure a call at 256-215-6769 for details and to enroll. Again, that is Tate Cure at 256-215-6769.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law, the name with proven results.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, you can give us a call. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. Again, that phone number is 844-899-8857. The lines are open. Looking at the queue right now, so if you got a call, go ahead and place it. We're going to start off with a quick hit from Nigeria, where they are officially more than doubling their minimum wage. This comes after the country's main labor federations went on a general strike. They called the strike off after the government signaled a willingness to negotiate and have been in negotiations since. However, they recently renewed threats to strike, this time for 1 month if negotiations did not conclude soon. And so they did. This win does fall far short of the original demand, though, which was to increase the minimum wage by more than 10 times. Since 2019, Nigeria, which is the most populous country in Africa, has had a minimum wage of 30,000 naira, or a little less than $20 per month. Even on the continent of Africa, this is a low minimum wage, with multiple other countries having monthly minimum wages of $100, $200, $300, or even $400 per month. This low standard, coupled with rising inflation and corruption in the government, is what precipitated the strike. The unions were originally asking for an increase to a minimum wage of 500,000 naira, or about $300 per month. The agreement with the government is to raise the minimum wage to 70,000 naira, or $44 per month. The agreement also includes a commitment to review the minimum wage in 3 years instead of the customary 5. Reportedly, one of the considerations for accepting the lower proposals is that states within Nigeria would have been unable to pay salaries at the originally proposed level. Heading back to the United States, we've been hearing a lot about a new probe into the United Auto Workers and President Shawn Fain. Specifically, we have heard allegations that Shawn Fain has improperly used his authority for the benefit of people that he is close to, for the benefit of family members, and that he has improperly retaliated against his officers. When the allegations were announced, I said, investigate, right? Nobody's above investigation. As far as I'm concerned, nobody is above the law. And if things are legitimately found to be at issue, then throw the bum out. That's the position that I take on anybody. But we did note that the allegations were coming from other union officials, many of whom come from the opposing caucus that Fain beat in the United Auto Workers International elections. That same caucus is the one that had the corruption problems in the first place that brought in the Federal Monitor, now responsible for these investigations. So while I personally never opposed the investigations, I was also personally always skeptical that there was ever any there, right? And so new reporting does show even more reason to be skeptical. For a little bit of background on this reason for skepticism, it's important to know that the UAW was one of the first unions to endorse a ceasefire in Gaza, coming out and being part of the initial formation of a national labor coalition for ceasefire. They did a rally in D.C. With some prominent Congress members, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. And, this ruffled some feathers. Some people didn't like that. And that is your right as an American to not like a position that the UAW or any union takes politically. Anybody is more than welcome to have their opinion, no matter where they are. However, one of those people that did not like this move by the UAW was the Federal Monitor himself, Neil Barofsky. I'm reading reporting now from Ryan Grimm at his new venture Dropsite News. Quote, "The move did not sit well with supporters of Israel's war, among them Neil Barofsky, and he let Fain know about it directly." This is insane. On December the 14th, 2 weeks after the UAW released its statement, Fain appeared on Capitol Hill for a press conference with members of Congress calling for a ceasefire. The evening before, according to a source familiar with the conversation, Barofsky called Fain and urged him to rethink the union position. Barofsky said that it pained him to see the UAW's wheel logo and anti-war protests where UAW members were present, and he told Fain that there had been repeated instances of anti-Semitism at those protests. Again, we know that to be largely not the case. Barofsky told Fain that he was not calling as the Federal Monitor, who has nearly unchecked power over the union, but merely in his personal capacity. Still reading from Dropsite, Fain told Barofsky, the source said, that the ceasefire resolution was in no way anti-Semitic, which is obvious, or even pro-Palestinian, which is also true, but simply an expression of the union's desire for peace. Fain added that it was impossible for the Monitor to call the union president in a strictly personal capacity, given the power dynamic at play, but that the union intended to stand by its call for a ceasefire, and he would be appearing at the press conference on Capitol Hill the next day, and the event went off as planned. Now, this is, as Shawn Fain noted, completely inappropriate.
Yes.
It is. So, really, frankly, when this was initially made public, my position was that if anything else like this comes out, that the entire labor movement really needs to take a very strong stance against this. But frankly, I think this is enough in and of itself that we should be seeing calls for Barofsky to resign. This is just completely inappropriate. As Fain noted, it's just not possible for the Federal Monitor, who, again, as Ryan Grimm points out, has nearly unchecked authority over the United Auto Workers. And not for good reason, right? There was real corruption. in the United Auto Workers under the Administration Caucus, and real reason for government oversight. But the fact remains that the Federal Monitor has nearly unchecked authority over the UAW, and therefore the Federal Monitor cannot, it's just not possible. It is just not possible for somebody who has that much authority over an institution to simply relay their opinion, in my personal capacity. And, I'm just saying, I don't like that. It's also the case that I can do whatever I want to your organization, and I can completely ruin you if I want to. And also, I happen to think that what you're doing is bigoted, right? I mean, that's another thing, right? That what we're talking about here is not even that Borofsky told Sean Fain that, look, I mean, the union is calling for a 40% tax on capital gains, and I think it really should be like 30%. I think it should be 30%. I mean, that's something that it's still right. It would not be appropriate if that was said, but it's still not. It's not that charged, right? You're disagreeing over tax rates, and so it would still very much be inappropriate. But it is on a completely different level from calling the union and saying, I think that the political position that you are taking that is completely unrelated to my responsibility as a federal monitor is bigoted, is racist, is anti-Semitic. That is, and so, obviously, if you are the president of this union, who is under unchecked authority from this federal monitor, that is, he's leveling accusations of bigotry at you. How would that not affect his ability to do his job? How could Borofsky think that he is tasked with overseeing an organization of unreconstructed bigots and not let that taint his ability to oversee the organization? It's really, it's frankly, unbelievable, even more so that he would express that. It's even one thing if he personally thinks that, and he's talking to people that he knows, he's talking to his wife over a beer, and he says, I think, this thing that the UAW is doing is anti-Semitic. But to go as far as to communicate that to the UAW is completely and wholly inappropriate, and he should resign. He should resign. He cannot continue to do this. He cannot continue to perform his role. But that's not all. Borofsky himself confirmed that he made the call, so there is no denial of this call happening. He confirmed that he made the call in a letter that he sent to the executive board. That letter was first reported by the Detroit News. The letter itself was perhaps even more inappropriate, again, reading from Dropsite News, to write and send. On February 11th, according to an email sent to Borofsky by Benjamin Dichter, a UAW attorney, the Anti-Defamation League wrote to Borofsky and, quote, complained about the union's demand for a ceasefire in Gaza, and in particular the actions of Local 7902 in support of the same. Borofsky, in a letter to the UAW board, wrote that, quote, although this issue is outside of the monitor's jurisdiction, we thought it was important to forward the message to the International Executive Board given the serious concerns raised here. He then added, confirming he made the call to Fain, for what it's worth, as I previously shared with Sean, similar concerns were raised directly to me shortly after the IEB issued its own ceasefire statement. And so here we have not only confirmation that Borofsky made this call, he's not denying it. We also have a letter from Borofsky forwarding accusations of anti-Semitism from the Anti-Defamation League, which is another whole slew of inappropriate stuff. The Anti-Defamation League is forwarding things to the Federal Monitor? This is, whoever did this at the Anti-Defamation League should resign. That's a completely, wholly inappropriate thing to be forwarding your political, your political disagreements with the UAW to the Federal Monitor. I mean, the implicit and frankly almost explicit thing that the ADL is wanting here is for Borofsky to use his leverage over the UAW to get the UAW to change its position on Israel. It's just absurd. It's just absurd. Borofsky should resign. The person at the ADL should resign. It's all of this is completely inappropriate. But we're still not done with Borofsky's inappropriate actions. After he sent the letter, the UAW board held its next quarterly meeting on the week of February 19th, and this time, Borofsky joined remotely, having missed the meeting when the ceasefire resolution was voted on. A source at the meeting said union officials confronted him about the inappropriate lobbying on an issue that is not within his remit. Borofsky defended his position, arguing that the ADL was an unimpeachable authority on the question. That Borofsky continued to debating the union's position on a ceasefire stunned the board members. Fain and Borofsky's relationship had been strong before the Gaza war, as both had the same interest, to reform and root out corruption at the UAW. It's been a pretty collaborative working relationship with the Monitor, said one official, up until now. And so after that, so here we've got, three instances. Borofsky calls Fain in my personal capacity, I'm not really implying anything else. It's just my personal capacity. He sends a letter to the UAW with accusations of anti-Semitism from the ADL. And then he calls in to a meeting of the International Executive Board and debates the merits of their ceasefire resolution in Gaza. I mean, it's just wild. It's unbelievable. And so then after all of this, on Friday, February 23rd, UAW attorney Benjamin Dichter sent Borofsky a blistering letter after the board meeting ended, telling the Monitor that the union was flabbergasted at the breach of ethics. You called, and this is from Dichter's letter, you called President Fain and introduced your conversation with President Fain as one that was, quote, strictly on a personal level, unquote, during which time you shared with President Fain your personal concerns about the union's position on the crisis in Gaza. Your call to President Fain on an issue so blatantly outside of the Monitor's jurisdiction was inappropriate, as your office holds disproportionate power over the UAW, and even a, quote, strictly personal sharing of opinion implicitly implicates such power dynamic. Nonetheless, out of respect for you and the office of the Monitor, President Fain discussed the conversation with only those in his inner circle and chose not to escalate the improper exchange any further. Dichter added that it was additionally inappropriate for Borofsky to lobby the board regarding the ADL's objection to the UAW's call for a ceasefire. In a statement to the New York Times, Borofsky denied the union's charge that he acted inappropriately. Quote, this false account is offensive and an obvious attempt to distract attention from the most recent report. We have adhered to standard norms of a monitorship in referring complaints to union leadership. So, again, not denying it, just saying that it's fine that I'm doing this. It's fine that I'm calling in to the International Executive Board meetings and debating political resolutions completely outside of my jurisdiction. That's all totally fine and dandy. I should be able to do that. And then here comes the kicker. Here's when we start getting the allegations of impropriety start happening. On February 29th, just 6 days after the UAW sent its letter to Borofsky complaining about his improper lobbying, Borofsky sent the UAW a sweeping demand for documents, saying he was opening an investigation into Fain over a dispute Fain had with the Secretary-Treasurer. That letter was made public in a court filing by Borofsky this week. He also asked for, quote, any and all emails, text messages, and instant messages sent between Fain, his top deputies, and his lawyers from February 12th through February 23rd. That covers pretty much the exact time that the UAW and Borofsky were jockeying over the ADL's complaint about their call for a ceasefire. So it just so happens, it just happens to be the case that Borofsky wants every single piece of communication from and to Fain while he was acting inappropriately, while Borofsky was acting inappropriately. That sweeping document request would amount to 750,000 documents by one estimate. And this all comes as the UAW, and one local in particular, is being hauled in front of Congress for its resolution in support of a ceasefire, being made to answer questions about the political position of your union in front of hostile politicians. This is, that whole deal with Virginia Fox and everybody else in the, frankly, the House Un-American Activities Committee. is calling back to an era that I thought in America that we had put behind us. The whole Red Scare and McCarthyite smears of people. It's of course anti-free speech and again completely inappropriate. But look, I do want to be fair. I do want to be fair and say that it is possible. It's possible that all of this is a huge coincidence. It just so happens that yes, okay, it's true that Borofsky is being wildly inappropriate. He should resign and all of this kind of stuff. But it's possible that is happening, and Shawn Fain is acting inappropriately as well. It's all right. That's theoretically possible. It's theoretically possible, and it's also theoretically possible that this is all happening. Simultaneously. It just so happens that the first allegation against Shawn Fain also comes only after and almost immediately after Borofsky starts this crazed attempt to lobby the UAW about its political positions. It's possible. It's possible, right? So let's take a look at the allegations. One of the allegations is that, let's see. One of the allegations is that he made demands to benefit his domestic partner and her sister, according to a court filing. Right? However, the actual complaint is slightly different. This again from DropSite. Rich Boyer, who Fain reassigned in May from his job as vice president, said that his reassignment action was void because Fain implemented it in retaliation for my refusal to accede to demands by Brother Fain and his agents that I take actions involving the Stellantis assignment that would have benefited Brother Fain's domestic partner and her sister. Ryan Grimm points out that the difference between to benefit, as the Journal described it, and would have benefited, which is Boyer's phrasing, is not just grammatical. If Fain pushed for a broad policy or negotiation tactic that would have benefited many people, and among those are his partner and his sister, that's different than Fain asking for specific favors for his partner and sister. And this is, the thing to point out is that Fain's fiancée works for Stellantis. She is a Stellantis employee, as is Fain's fiance's sister, a Stellantis employee. And so literally anything that Shawn Fain does to the benefit of Stellantis employees will also benefit his domestic partner and her sister, right? That's definitionally the case. And so then you go, that's weird. That's weird that actually that's the first time you're hearing about this, because all of the news coverage never mentions that Fain's domestic partner is just a worker at Stellantis, right? When you hear all this stuff about, Fain is trying to do things to benefit his people close to him, what you imagine and what they want you to imagine is that Fain is taking a check from the UAW's checkbook and writing dollar amounts and sending it off to his fiancée. That's obviously the first thing that comes to mind, and that's what they want you to think, because if they wanted you to get an accurate picture, they would have told you that, by the way, Fain's domestic partner is a Stellantis employee. It's just absolutely crazy. And then, just yesterday, the UAW issued a letter to employees of Stellantis that further threw doubt on the idea that the actions of Shawn Fain in this area, specifically demoting Rich Boyer, which is within his constitutional authority and which was approved by a vote of the International Executive Board. This is not something that he does not have the authority to do in the UAW Constitution, and you can say, wow, that's crazy. He shouldn't have the authority. And maybe I agree with you and maybe I don't, but the fact is that he has the authority under the UAW Constitution, and the International Executive Board voted to affirm his position to demote Rich Boyer from the head of the Stellantis department of the UAW. Okay, so some more. So the UAW sent out a letter just yesterday, I believe it was, about this situation. Detailing some of the stuff that they say they have uncovered since demoting Boyer, who was a member of the administration caucus, the caucus that opposed Shawn Fain in the UAW election. Unfortunately, This is from the UAW. When we took over the UAW Stellantis department, we found many instances where leadership had failed to communicate, distorted facts, and mismanaged our position with the company on key issues for UAW Stellantis members. Our work over the past months has been to get straight answers on where we stand, push to win on those issues that have been neglected or ignored, and accurately and truthfully inform the membership of where things stand. Here are some important updates. On the Belvedere and Kokomo transmission, through our involvement and ongoing negotiations with the White House and federal agencies, we were able to secure over $300 million in conversion grants to Belvedere Assembly and $250 million to Kokomo Transmission to ensure the company keeps its commitments to our members at those facilities. Those grants are revocable by the Department of Energy for any reason with consideration for commitments made in collective bargaining. Our political program is going to push to ensure those funds are used to create strong UAW jobs in our communities. The contractual language from the Belvedere investment letter requires the company to be producing a mid-size product at Belvedere by 2027. That's what the contractual language required. We have since learned that previous Stellantis department leadership was meeting with the company and discussing moving the date of production to 2028, which is after our contract expires. We want to be clear, this is absolutely unacceptable, and we do everything in our power to hold Stellantis accountable to their contractual commitments. We also know that the company has backed off its commitments to open a Mopar mega hub in Belvedere in 2024, and we are in preliminary discussions for enhanced benefits for those workers who are affected while not rushing towards consolidation of our regional hubs, as other members would have been negatively impacted. On Dodge Ram, in the most recent round of negotiations, we fought hard to keep Dodge Ram production in the United States. In the course of taking over the department, we have unfortunately discovered that the previous department leadership had communicated with the company and allowed Stellantis to move overflow production of the Dodge Ram to Mexico. Let me be clear, we have a dual source letter to protect SHAP, but the overflow is not going to Warren Truck. And we have heard the rumors of potential layoffs there, though those have not been confirmed. This is in direct contradiction to what was previously communicated by department leadership to the President's office, to the Stellantis Council, and our membership. We are working hard to address this issue with the company and will fight to keep all Dodge Ram production in the United States. And so, those are very serious accusations from the UAW about mismanagement of Stellantis, of the Stellantis relationship between Stellantis and the UAW by, he was unnamed, but Rich Boyer, right? And if any of that is even remotely true, I think basically any union member, and particularly a UAW member at Stellantis, would also have supported his demotion. Making backroom deals with the company to move production to Mexico, making backroom deals with the company to push a commitment to reopen Belvedere by a year. I mean, this is all, these are reasonable reasons for demotion, and I think anybody would think so. And so, with all of that, context, it really is seeming more and more like the investigation into Shawn Fain and the UAW by the Federal Monitor is just a bunch of trumped up hokum. There have been no more details that I have seen about the expenditures that the Secretary-Treasurer claimed were inappropriate. That's the other claim. Those are basically the two claims, that Shawn Fain is doing things for the benefit of people close to him, and then that the Secretary-Treasurer, who also had some duties reassigned, the Secretary-Treasurer saying that she said that some of the expenditures that Shawn Fain was wanting were inappropriate. Those were basically the two claims. I haven't seen or heard or read of any more details about the expenditures that the Secretary-Treasurer claimed were inappropriate, but if the pattern that I detailed previously is anything to go by, this is likely trumped up too. So there we go.
Yeah, just totally ridiculous. Appreciate you breaking that down for us, because I think folks are just going to see headlines, and that's what they want. They want folks to just see a headline that says, "Oh, UAW in trouble, under investigation. Oh, I guess the new guy must be up to something." And I think that is clearly, the intended effect. But it's important to have the facts and to know what's really going on here. And it's an example of repression and retaliation. And it's unacceptable. And I agree with you, Jacob. I think all of labor should really rally behind UAW and support them as they face against these attacks on their free speech rights and their political rights, their rights to express their positions. And, again, the rights of folks to reform their unions, right? That's also part of this as well. Shawn Fain was elected by the members to reform. And right. So some folks from the old regime are not going to be particularly welcome, because of actions like what was described here.
Right.
Those are just allegations, of course, as well. But like you said, it's very, very concerning. And that's the sort of thing that gives unions a bad name. So,
right.
It's very, very concerning. And, just want to send my solidarity to all those who are standing strong, expressing their rights, expressing their speech and their freedom to have political positions. And that's what we're here for, right? We're able to come together and speak up. That's what unions are supposed to be for. So, highly objectionable. And I agree. This guy should totally get out of there.
Yeah. Yeah, Neil Borofsky needs to resign. Labor needs to call on him to resign. Whoever's responsible for this completely inappropriate email to the Federal Monitor from the ADL should resign. Labor should call on Heads to Roll from the ADL. I mean, this is all incredibly inappropriate and really gross. And but of course, have you seen even among, and this is frustrating, AL.com reported on the most recent letter from the Monitor that was made public in the court filing. AL.com reported on that, and that report from AL.com came out after all of this stuff about the Federal Monitor's inappropriate lobbying the UAW about Israel and Palestine. And would you believe that none of that context was mentioned in AL.com?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, was not mentioned at all. And I also I tweeted at the author of I tweeted at the author about this, at the author of the piece, William Thornton, and he actually typically I have asked him questions on Twitter publicly, and he has answered me before. He did not answer me this time, and it is really effing crazy that context was not included. Of course, you don't expect that from like Yellowhammer News or 1819 News, these people who are funded from Koch brother groups and Alabama Power and all of these kinds of, all that kind of stuff, right? You don't expect that from those groups. And also, just to be explicit, you didn't get that from those groups either. Those groups have not mentioned all of this stuff coming out about the Monitor and the UAW.
Right.
But that's not surprising. That's not surprising. You don't expect it from those because those are just like nakedly anti-worker, conservative, reactionary outlets. Like they don't, I mean, there's some amount to kind of pretend to be like real news, but like it's much less, you expect AL.com you expect AL.com to be better than 1819 News, but their reporting around this situation has not been.
Yeah, that's sad.
Which is bonkers.
To leave out the entirety of the context. The entire reason why this controversy has started. And it's a shame too, because I really applaud UAW for taking a stand for a ceasefire.
Mm-hmm.
I think they did the right thing. I think they have done the right thing by working with other unions to build a coalition to strengthen that call for a ceasefire. That's where the majority of the American people stand as well. And so, unfortunately, there are going to be folks who continue to try to suppress that opinion. But, they're on the wrong side of history, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's I agree with that. I agree with that. Obviously, I have been pro ceasefire basically from the beginning. I'm generally pro peace, anti-war. You know, I think unfortunately that's like a more controversial position than I think it should be. But again, you know, I just want to reiterate that you should be able to disagree with the UAW on its ceasefire position and still also think that Neil Barofsky needs to resign. Right.
Correct.
I think that's totally and completely consistent. You could be the most pro-Israel, you know, anti-Palestinian person out there, right? I don't know why you would be that. But if you were that, you could still also believe accurately that it is inappropriate for this federal monitor to lobby the UAW about its political positions.
Absolutely. I mean, because, you know, the tide could be turned, right? It could be the exact opposite, right?
Yeah.
What if they were expressing solidarity with Israel and the monitor didn't like that?
Yeah.
And went after them for that. Now, obviously, given the power dynamics, that's unlikely. But, you know, that to your point, you know, it's about the principle of the matter that you should be free to have political positions, and it is not the federal monitor's business whatsoever. Right. That's not their role. That's not their authority. It's not their place. And so it's a complete abuse of authority. But it's very troubling because, you know, this is the sort of repression that we do see against anti-war forces in this country. It's not unusual. It's not new. And I fear it will continue and escalate. So it's something that as unions speak out more on these issues, we have to be prepared for the backlash.
Yeah. I did get a question in the chat. Is Ryan Grimm still going to be able to come on? And I meant to take him out of the thumbnail. And I got our graphics guy to do another thumbnail, and I'm going to change it after the show is over. But he's not available. Something came up last minute, and he wasn't able to make it, so we just did the segment basically without him. But you know, we're in touch with him, and definitely if there's any other big breaking stuff on this story, we'll try to get him on. But obviously with Ryan Grimm and the work that he does, I'm sure there's going to be something else that we want to get him on for in the future. So we'll try to
appreciate his reporting on this.
And I appreciate his willingness to come on, even though, you know, prior to something coming up. So we're going to go ahead and take a break. We're going to be right back. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That phone number is 844-899-8857. If you would like to call in, feel free to. We'll take your calls on the other side of the break. Also, we're going to be talking about Trump attacking the UAW at the RNC. So stay tuned. You don't want to miss it. We will be right back.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Iron Workers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm Attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morris. I'm here with my co-host Adam Keller. We're taking calls. If you got a call you want to send in, you want to give us a call, 844-899-TVLR. That phone number is 844-899-8857. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We've got some 40 people tuning in to us on the YouTube and only like 25 likes. What is up with that? If you haven't liked the stream, then go ahead and do that. Also, subscribe to the channel if you have not. Then go ahead and do that. Subscribe to the channel, like the stream, all that kind of stuff. Some good comments in here about the segment on the UAW and the Federal Monitor. Lots of consensus that it's bad, actually, for a Federal Monitor with unchecked power over a union to be lobbying them on their political positions. Very controversial takes in our comment section today. Appreciate everybody also watching us on Facebook. Mel and Joe, as always. Joe says, is Sean O'Brien the prez or suckatary of the Teamsters? But we'll be talking a little bit about Sean O'Brien in the second half of the program. So stay tuned for that. The second half of the program is what we call overtime. It's another hour and a half that we do after the first half of the program. We talk a little bit more nationally. We talk a little bit about more national news in the second half of the program. But we've been talking about national news, the whole show, really, except for last week in Southern Labor and Boss Watch is kind of a nationally focused show today. But even more, but overtime is typically national in focus.
So if you don't get enough of us on the radio, then you should find us online, Facebook, YouTube, and listen to the second half of the program, wherever you get your podcasts. So we wanted to talk a little bit about Trump attacking the UAW. He did this at the Republican National Convention. This convention, as I alluded, it included on the first night the first ever address of a Teamsters president to the Republican National Convention, Sean O'Brien, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later. It also included speeches from Scab Hulk Hogan.
Boo.
Boo. Yeah, Hulk Hogan bad. Hulk Hogan very bad because... If you did not know this, he is responsible for the destruction of a union campaign that was very serious, that Jesse Ventura, former governor of Montana for the Minnesota for the Green Party, or just an independent.
I can't recall. But
interesting character.
He's an interesting character.
Interesting character, but real, he gives a crap. A little bit, at least.
He was involved in organizing this drive, and
he was the leader of the campaign to unionize wrestlers at the WWE. And if that sounds strange, it really should sound strange actually that the WWE does not have a union. The WWE and the UFC are the only professional sports to not have a union, right? Or do boxers have a union? I don't know.
I don't believe boxers do as well either. I mean, particularly such an individualistic sport. I guess it's a tougher hoe. But
WWE in particular, you should really take some time and read about working conditions for wrestlers. Even ones that are famous and you would think make a lot of money, actually don't make that much money, and then they're also classified as quote-unquote independent contractors, which is obviously absurd. The idea that Rey Mysterio is not an employee of the WWE is just silly to even say and be serious about it. They have to schedule their own travel. They have to get their own flights. They have to get their own hotels. They have to, get their own health insurance, which is a huge thing. They don't have any retirement plans, none of that kind of stuff. And so anything other than the one or two at a time people like Hulk Hogan are really not doing great. Some of them are okay, but they're not doing great. And they take home something like 20% of the revenue that they generate, whereas athletes in sports where there are unions take home something like 50% of the revenue that they generate, which sounds much more fair than 20% of the revenue that you generate. And so Jesse Ventura was leading a very serious union campaign, and Hulk Hogan snitched on him to Vince McMahon, and it came out later that Hulk Hogan, for the WrestleMania that this all happened around, made more that year than all the other wrestlers combined. And so, why would he want a union? But not only why would he want a union, it's fine to have this or that opinion on the union, but the idea that you would go and tell management about a union campaign, knowing that it's going to negatively impact people that you work with every day, and that really your life is in their hands and their life is in your hands, literally, in an occupation like the WWE. It is just so gross. And so Jesse Ventura has been on multiple podcasts, and somebody asked him at one point, would you ever see your friendship with Hulk Hogan rekindling? And he said very, very flatly, no, absolutely not. I have to trust people to be their friend, and there's no way that I could trust Hulk Hogan after that. And Jesse Ventura was fired from the WWE. So very, very gross. So RNC, included speeches from scabs and things like that, including Donald Trump, also a scab, and crossed an IATSE picket line in New York. And as the scab from Florida, Donald Trump, gave his speech, one of the things that he did was attacked the United Auto Workers and the UAW president, Shawn Fain. Let's listen to this clip.
And right now, as we speak, large factories just started, are being built across the border in Mexico. So with all the other things happening on our border, and they're being built by China to make cars and to sell them into our country, no tax, no anything. The United Auto Workers ought to be ashamed for allowing this to happen. And the leader of the United Auto Workers should be fired immediately. And every single auto worker, union and non-union, should be voting for Donald Trump, because we're going to bring back car manufacturing, and we're going to bring it back fast.
Just break news that the United Auto Workers have, in a socialist communist fashion, taken over the production and management of American auto companies. Is that because that's what would be implied by saying the UAW has moved or should be ashamed for moving production to Mexico? That seems to be the implication. So have I missed like a major news story where the UAW has taken over the operation and production and management and ownership of the American auto companies?
Yeah, I missed that too. I was not aware.
You were not aware of it either.
I was not aware. I thought that those were still corporations that had boards of directors and investors.
Owned by the capitalist class, not the workers.
Correct.
That was your understanding still?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
That was mine too. So I was very confused when Trump said that.
Not sure what the hell he's talking about.
So maybe it could be, if we have missed that news, I would love to see that news. I think that workers should have control. And so, look, if I've missed that news, give us a call, 844-899-TVLR. Let us know, where we can find that, because I would love to read it and interview somebody about it. But, as far as best I can tell, it is not the case that American auto workers have taken over the American auto companies. And so, therefore, production decisions are still made by management and the owner class, and so management is the ones are going to be the ones responsible for any production moves to Mexico. That's still my understanding, and so maybe Trump was just mistaken. Maybe he read like a wrong report, or it's possible that he was lying. I don't know if how much we. That we would believe things like that Trump would lie. That kind of seems outlandish, but that's a possibility. It's like physically possible, right? That
Sure.
he lied,
Sure.
I mean, those are kind of the options that we have right now. Either Trump is wrong, or we're wrong, and we missed the takeover of American auto companies by the United Auto Workers, which we would be happy to be wrong about, or Trump is lying. So those are kind of the three options that we're left with. But of course, so that's kind of where we're at there as far as auto production being moved to Mexico. But it's also worth knowing that there have been more automotive manufacturing jobs created under the Biden administration than under the Trump administration. As a matter of fact, that's kind of the situation that we have here in the year of our Lord 2024. Additionally, Trump was attacking the, quote, EV mandates, which is, really kind of, again, not exactly what's going on. There's a push for electric vehicles from the federal government. There's investments and incentives and all of this kind of stuff that is actually not hurting American automotive manufacturers, but is actually helping them to the tune of tens of billions of dollars, is kind of actually what we're looking at. We're looking at big fat checks in the, what is $10 billion? What is that? Is that like 12 figures or something? Like huge checks from the federal government to American automotive manufacturers for the production of electric vehicles. And, so if we go into a Trump administration and Trump takes away all of those electric vehicle, incentives and investments from the state and everything like this, that is actually going to hurt American automotive manufacturing, specifically at Volkswagen and Volkswagen, from the famous Volkswagen company, and Blue Oval, which is Ford's thing, both of those in Tennessee, both benefiting from electric vehicle and emission reductions incentives from the federal government. Additionally, there are similar things going on in Georgia with Bluebird in Georgia making electric buses. There's all sorts of these jobs that are being created in large part because of federal investment. And so if you take all of that away, actually what you're going to do is you're going to kill jobs. And this is all taking place in the context of, as Trump rightly mentions, China is running away with the EV market. They're going leaps and bounds ahead of American automotive companies in electric vehicle innovation and production. And so it is very, very important that the state invest and incentivize American automotive corporations to do electric vehicle production, because apparently they're not going to do this on their own, and they need some pushing. And if they do not get that pushing and they continue to lag behind in EV production, then they're going to get completely left behind, and they're going to get completely boxed out of not only, the global market, but also the American market. And we will all be driving Chinese electric vehicles in 50 years when that is basically all that's being produced. And Chinese electric vehicles are so far superior to American electric vehicles. That is the world that Trump would resign us to. So, look, that's all kind of important stuff to think about. And also, Trump, when GM workers went on strike in 2019 while he was president, he didn't do anything about it. When Alabama workers at a Gadsden tire factory were out of a job in early 2020 while he was still president because Goodyear moved production to Mexico. He didn't do anything about it. When GM closed the Lordstown plant, he didn't do anything about it. So there's just all of these cases where Trump talking the talk, but not really walking the walk on bringing factory and manufacturing jobs to the United States. And so, you really should kind of be skeptical about what's going on with Trump and his attacks on the UAW. And it is actually very funny that Sean Fain really does seem to be living in his head rent-free. I mean, just almost every other speech that Trump mentions, that Trump gives, he's talking about Sean Fain, and he alludes to Sean Fain. And so, it's very funny that Sean Fain has gotten in his head this much. So
much so that he thinks he should be fired.
That he thinks he should be fired.
The democratically elected union president doesn't work like that, buddy.
Exactly.
Yeah, you don't get to just call the boss and fire.
Right. Yeah,
I know he's used to doing that on TV, firing people.
Right. Sean Fain is actually the manager. You can't call the manager because Sean Fain is the manager. So
yeah, so that's always hilarious, right? When people call for democratically elected leadership to be fired. That's called organize. Yeah. You just organize and you win next time, or push them out, or recall, or use whatever methods are available. But that's a boss for you, right? That's their first instinct, is to say, we should fire somebody I don't like.
Right. And so, in conclusion, here is a clip of Sean Fain on Donald Trump.
Donald Trump is a scab. Donald Trump is a billionaire, and that's who he represents. If Donald Trump ever worked in an auto plant, he wouldn't be a UAW member. He'd be a company man trying to squeeze the American worker. Donald Trump stands against everything we stand for as a union, as a society. When you go back to our core issues, wages, retirement, health care, and our time, that's what this election's about. This election's about who will stand up with us and who will stand in our way. Those are the questions that will win or lose this election and will decide our fate. Those are the questions that will determine the future of our country and the fate of the working class.
All right, so there we go. Don't really have anything else to say about that, so let's go ahead and get to Boss Watch. Boss Watch is where we kind of do the mirror, the mirror thing to last week in Southern labor. We take a look at what bosses were up to in the U.S. South and the American colonies, and it's not good. It's not good. So starting off in Texas, while one of the nation's largest manufacturers of commercial flooring surfaces, including recycled rubber products used throughout the nation in playgrounds, fitness centers, and sports fields, touts its products' safety and environmental benefits, a U.S. Department of Labor investigation has found the company less committed to protecting its own employees. An inspection of Ecor International Incorporated's Mexia plant by the Department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration in January of 2024 found more than a dozen safety and health violations. Investigators discovered the company made employees stand on a forklift's elevated tines to reach work areas, failed to prevent small fires fueled by improper buildup of combustible dust, and permitted potentially explosive atmospheres to exist, lacked safe areas for welding, exposed employees to slip, trip, and fall hazards, allowed untrained workers to operate forklifts, and failed to ensure machines had required safety guards. OSHA issued Ecor International citations for 1 willful violation and 15 serious violations. The company faces about $300,000 in proposed penalties. In a separate investigation in May of 2024 at a new Ecor facility in Ozark, Alabama, OSHA found similar machine guard hazards unchecked and employees exposed to potential electrocution and amputation dangers. A successful enterprise like Ecor International has the resources to establish and follow a comprehensive safety and health program and to address hazards proactively before disaster strikes, Camacho added. Camacho being regional director for the Department of Labor. Staying in Texas, Altman Specialty Plants LLC, which is the largest horticultural grower in the United States, will pay about $172,000 in monetary relief and furnish extensive injunctive relief to resolve a finding of sex discrimination and retaliation by the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in a conciliation agreement the federal agency announced last week. The conciliation follows an EEOC investigation into charges where EEOC found that an Altman supervisor subjected female employees to sexual harassment and a sexually hostile work environment for an extensive period at its Austin, Texas location. The investigation further revealed that after complaining about sexual harassment, the employees were retaliated against, thereby creating a chilling effect, making Altman's EEO policies and complaint procedures ineffective. Such alleged conduct is a violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination, including sexual harassment based on sex, and retaliation for engaging in a protected activity. Altman disputes the allegations, but cooperated with EEOC during its investigation into conduct that was alleged to be in violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Altman states that it makes efforts to ensure that all its employees are provided with a safe workplace free from discrimination and retaliation of any kind. However, they agreed to a $172,000 check and a conciliation agreement, which under the 3-year conciliation agreement settling the charges, Altman will pay $172,000 in monetary damages. The company also agreed to enforce its non-discrimination and non-retaliation policies, revise and implement an effective complaint procedure, distribute and post in English and Spanish an equal employment opportunity non-discrimination notice, and conduct sex discrimination and retaliation training for all employees at its Austin location. Sexual harassment remains a persistent problem among horticulture and agricultural workers, specifically those with limited English proficiency, said Norma J. Guzman, field director for the EEOC's San Antonio field office. Protecting vulnerable workers remains a priority for the EEOC, and employers should not relinquish its responsibility or oversight to ensure a work environment free of harassment and retaliation. This oversight is especially important when a supervisor in a position of authority routinely works unsupervised, allowed to hire and work directly with close friends and family members, creating the potential for noncompliance. And heading over to Louisiana, Dollar General stores will pay $295,000 and furnish other relief to settle a U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission age discrimination, harassment, and retaliation lawsuit, the federal agency announced last week. According to the lawsuit, from July of 2016 until January of 2018, a newly hired Dollar General regional director in Oklahoma harassed district managers who were in their 50s and older by calling them grumpy old men, telling them that he was building a, quote, millennial team and that they needed, quote, young blood in the stores, and threatening them to keep up with the millennial team or quit or be fired. After one of the district managers quit and reported the harassment to the company, Dollar General sought feedback from the district managers about the new regional director, but did not investigate reports of age discrimination. Emboldened, The regional director continued harassing older workers and fired 2 district managers in retaliation for reporting his misconduct. Eventually, another district manager was forced to quit because of the continual harassment. Such alleged conduct violates the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, which prohibits age discrimination and harassment, as well as retaliation against workers who reported such conduct. In addition to the payment to 3 former managers, the decree requires Dollar General to take a variety of actions to protect older workers in its eastern Oklahoma region from discrimination based on age, including training retail and human resources managers, adopting and distributing effective policies and procedures to prevent age harassment and discrimination, and notifying employees of their rights. The company will also report to the EEOC regarding compliance with the decree. Unfortunately, age discrimination in the workplace is pervasive and often goes unreported, said Andrea G. Baran, the EEOC's regional attorney for the St. Louis district. Employers must take serious, effective steps to prevent age discrimination and harassment. They must encourage employees to report any discriminatory treatment they receive or experience or observe on the job, and they must not tolerate any workplace behavior that demeans or ridicules older workers because of their age. In dishonorable mentions, the USDOL recovered almost $300,000 in back wages and liquidated damages for 92 employees after its investigation found that an Atlantic Beach, Florida property management group's improper pay practices denied them overtime wages that they earned. The USDOL's Wage and Hour Division found that Par Construction in Lake Charles, Louisiana, paid 19 non-exempt employees straight time for overtime for hours over 40 in a work week, denying these workers the time and 1/2 overtime premium required by law. The division recovered $74,000 in back pay and damages. Investigators with the USDOL's Wage and Hour Division found that the Non-Emergency Medical Transport Company, KDK Transport Company, in Coburn, West Virginia, applied the motor carrier exemption mistakenly, and by doing so failed to combine all hours worked by drivers, including driving and wait times, when computing total weekly hours for overtime wages for 60 drivers. The division recovered $170,000 for 60 workers. A USDOL investigation has recovered about $240,000 in overtime wages owed to 1,000 solar panel and system installers employed by renewable energy company Windmar Home in Puerto Rico that failed to include various bonuses in their salaries and calculated overtime wages incorrectly. That is the last. That's the last segment that we had prepped for the first half of the program. Looks like we've got time for one more. Which one do you want to do, you think? Adam, maybe the Samsung one? Since that one's kind of quick?
Sure, yeah, let's go for it. And on some international news.
All right. Just a reminder, our phone number is 844-899-TVLR. Again, that phone number is 844-899-8857. We will take calls at the start of overtime, which begins at 11 o'clock Central Time. So if you want to get in, go ahead and do that, 844-899-TVLR. So wrapping up with some international news, for the first time in the country's history, Samsung workers in South Korea are on an indefinite strike over pay and benefits. The same workers went on a one-day strike last month. The union leading the strike, the National Samsung Electronics Union, is consciously or unconsciously taking a page out of the playbook of the United Auto Workers. While they represent 30,000 workers, which is about 25% of the company's workforce, only 6,500 of them have stopped work so far, concentrated in one particular section of the company, that section being device solutions, which is an integral part of chip production. The union has said that it will build on its strategic leverage if its demands are not met by spreading the strike to DRAM and NAND chip production, and then to high bandwidth memory chips, which are essential for artificial intelligence. Some of the demands of the union are a 3.5% raise and an improvement in holiday pay, but the real contention is incentive pay. For Samsung workers, incentive pay can make up between 30 and 50% of total compensation. But this incentive pay is also heavily dependent on the firm's performance, not the individual worker. And even then, the exact formula is a secret. So for an example of why this is frustrating, in 2023, Samsung's memory chip line did not turn a profit. So many workers actually saw a compensation decrease despite their performance. Meanwhile, the CEO received a 50% pay increase to a total of $5.2 million US without any rationale being given from the company. The union is calling to replace the opaque incentive formula with a transparent one based on operating profit, so at least workers will know what to expect. Samsung's brutal demands from its workers have been known to cause blood disorders, killing or rendering permanently bedridden their employees. And there was an article about an ad that Samsung took out in the 90s, which is like a crazy thing to do for an ad, but talking about how they gave their employees a 3 a.m. coffee break because they worked so hard through the night.
How generous.
Yeah.
How generous.
So, the work culture at Samsung in South Korea seems really crazy. I wouldn't want to be there. And, definitely solidarity with the National Samsung Electronics Union, and hope they're able to win what they're looking for.
Absolutely. I mean, because it's all about preventing a race to the bottom. These corporations, they have no national loyalty. Just remember that. They will go wherever they can in a race to the bottom to seek highest profits from maximum exploitation of workers. And so that's why it's important that workers organize wherever they are, whether they're in Alabama or California or South Korea or Mexico. Workers have to organize and actually build power on the job so they can prevent some of this exploitation and actually improve their lives and build more leverage to try to prevent this race to the bottom.
Right. Adam, have you got some plugs for us?
Just want to remind folks, as I do every week, that Labor Notes has a lot of great training available. LaborNotes.org/events. Every month they have grievance or stewards trainings and all sorts of good workshops, race and labor workshops, you name it, they've got it. So always recommend folks check that out. Also wanted to mention that I was on America's Workforce radio podcast recently. Always appreciate the invite from Flash and the team over at America's Workforce. If you're not listening to them, check them out for sure. And I also recommend check out the Labor Radio Podcast Network. If you're into our show, there are some other shows out there that talk about similar topics. You may be interested. And of course, always connect us with folks. If you listen to other shows and you think we should appear on their show or they should appear on ours, let us know. We'd love to hear that. I also want to remind folks, if you are a local labor union member here in the Tennessee Valley, you should get involved with the North Alabama Area Labor Council. We just distributed candidate questionnaires this past week for City Council and School Board in the city of Huntsville. We are working on a Labor in the Pulpit program for Labor Day. We've got a very exciting Labor in the Schools campaign we've been building over the past year or two. So a lot of good stuff in the works. If you're a local labor union member and you're listening, reach out to us to get involved in the North Alabama Area Labor Council. And finally, I want to mention Alabama Arise is hosting some listening sessions, virtual town halls, and in-person meetings throughout the state. Go to alarise.org. You can find out more there. It's a summer membership drive, so if you haven't become a member of Alabama Arise, I do recommend make a donation of any amount. You become a member, you'll get to vote on the issue priorities for 2025, which is a really cool thing and a way to participate in trying to speak up for a better Alabama. And that's all I have today.
All right, folks. So that's going to be it for us on the first half of the program. Make sure you find us on Facebook and YouTube. We're going to continue streaming for at least another hour and a half. We got a couple of guests lined up for the second half of the program. First up, we're going to have Maddock Thomas. He is a researcher for Railroad Workers United. He's going to be talking about the white paper that he just released for Railroad Workers United about making the case for nationalizing the railroads. Good stuff. So we're going to be talking about that. Looking forward to having him on the program. We're also going to be talking to Alexander Edward, who is a Teamster and a host of the podcast Minion Death Cult, about how the Teamsters got him his job back. So really cool stuff there. Going to be talking to him about that. We also are going to be talking about Sean O'Brien's speech to the RNC and some of the fallout around that, including the announcement of a challenger to Sean O'Brien.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah. John Palmer, former Southern Region Vice President, current Vice President at Large, also former TDU member and TDU Steering Committee member, actually.
I know we've got some Teamsters in the audience, so if you've got some thoughts and opinions, definitely let us know in the live chat or give us a call. We'd love to take your call or hear your comments, see your comments. Definitely let us know how you're feeling about all the juicy news coming out of the Teamsters lately.
Yeah. So 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. 844-899-8857 is the phone number. We will take calls at the beginning of the second half of the show. TVLR.fm/donate is where you can go to make a donation if you are so inclined. TVLR.fm/store is where you can go to buy our very cool logo caps, Union made in the USA, obviously $35 plus shipping and handling. And like the stream if you haven't. We're going to be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on?
back. You're still listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. Co-host is Adam Keller. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That phone number is 844-899-8857 if you'd like to call in. We got a comment from Jay Digger, 4130, saying, I feel like every name you mention is just grifting until I hear a leader try and get a seat at the table as a shareholder, just a common strong-arm thief. So just, just on the idea that the aim of unions should be to get a seat as a shareholder, presumably like a board of director or something, a seat on the board, is like, I don't know, it's just kind of silly to me. It's difficult to understand why you would think that would be important unless you can get at least 50%. Because basically, any number of board seats on any corporation less than 50% is really not meaningful. It's not a meaningful thing to be in the management of an organization if you don't have a serious, like a serious contingent there. So if you have one seat on the board of directors, what does that do? What does that do for you?
Right.
I mean, maybe what it does is it gets you more information about the operations and finances of the company and better informs your position at the bargaining table. But it's like, that's not, that's kind of material, but not that material.
Yeah, I'm curious if that's what if they had in mind, if that's what they were talking about. I wasn't quite sure. I some understanding in some other countries, it is kind of that way.
Yeah, now in Germany, they do have... they have works councils, and the works councils elect from the employees, actually separate from the unions, people to management or people to run the company. It's not kind of like they're still workers, but they're on the board of directors or whatever, and they have, it's like 50% if your organization has more than 2,000 employees. You have to have 50% of your board be workers, which is cool. I like that. I like it. But does that mean that? But yeah, having one board member, it's not really that impressive to me. It's not really that impressive to me. I would not be, I wouldn't be giving up anything for that. Certainly in negotiations, that wouldn't be a number one priority because it's really just like kind of symbolic, really more than anything. If you only have one or two seats. But
hey, why stop there when we could own the means of production?
Exactly. Yeah, but
we could just run it ourselves. Just saying.
There you go.
It's a thought. It's a thought to consider.
But then so that's just kind of my evaluation of that as a goal worth going for. But then separately from that, do I believe that anybody that is not pushing to get 50% board membership as in their collective bargaining agreement, do I believe that they're a grifter? No, I don't. That's also silly. There are lots of things that you can ask for in negotiations. We can disagree about tactics or priorities and not accuse one or the other of acting in bad faith. And there's all sorts of reasons that you would prioritize wages and benefits and working conditions over control in a company. So kind of silly, kind of a silly comment, Jay Digger. Kind of strange.
I'm looking forward to this rail conversation, though. I know Rail Workers United has really been putting out the call for reforming our broken rail system. So yeah, I'm excited to hear from them.
Let's go ahead and bring Maddock on the line. Maddock Thomas is an undergraduate at Brown University, concentrating in urban studies and an avid transportation researcher, writer, and interlocutor. He's published and presented on a number of subjects relevant to railroads and public transportation and is a Stone Fellow and former visiting researcher at the B&O Railroad Museum. Maddock, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. I appreciate your taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you for having me.
So your report is titled Putting America Back on Track, The Case for a 21st Century Public Rail System. And I guess the first question to ask about the report that you have here is why? Why do it? What's what was the impetus for, getting your gears turning about public rail?
Yeah, so I would say a lot of it goes back to sort of a lot of the 2022 discussions around the rail strike, the conditions on the railroads, talking with rail workers, and then doing a little bit of research myself that sort of got me to the point of really coming to the conclusion that Railroad Workers United's call for public ownership of the railroads was correct, and not only necessary for rail workers, but also for farmers and businesses across the United States, for rail passengers, because we've seen a drastic deterioration in both the quality of life for rail workers and the number of jobs on the railroads, but also in the amount of freight shipped by rail. We're shipping 30% fewer carloads than we were in 2000. And they're ripping up infrastructure, which impedes passenger service. It's preventing any sort of expansion into rail, which could take freight off our roads, that would decongest our highways, help reduce carbon emissions. But the private duopolistic Class 1 railroads that own over 70% of all track in this country have no interest in doing that, much less providing any sort of decent working conditions to their employees.
So that was kind of the impetus of it. That was, the 2022 rail strike is kind of what got your gears turning about this. And when you say public rail ownership, my understanding of the railroad workers' call for rail ownership is that it's specifically literally the railroads, like the tracks and the ground that they're on. That is the proposal, to nationalize those, not necessarily the freight companies. Is that right?
I think that that's a discussion that's currently ongoing. There's a lot of questions surrounding what public rail would look like. I spend a section in my report talking about that. We're currently having both more discussions with stakeholders about what a public railroad should be structured as. But also I'm working on sort of a follow-up to this report that will delve more into the how do we get to the point of public ownership, and also what should it look like there? Because there is this idea of publicly owning the infrastructure. There's a lot of parts of the United States that already own a lot of rail infrastructure, especially sort of class 2 and 3 trackage, which is smaller branch lines generally. And those are owned by state DOTs. In my home state of Georgia, the GDOT owns 580 miles of track. And that's because the class 1s abandoned it. They didn't want to serve rural communities anymore. They decided it wasn't profitable enough. And so the state had to step in and take control of that infrastructure to maintain service, which is very necessary to a lot of businesses and a lot of agricultural enterprises and sort of smaller scale operations. And so that's sort of a model that's very easy to take and expand now, is just owning the infrastructure and leasing out or franchising operations to still private companies. But I personally am of the opinion that we also need to have some discussions about taking operations into public control, because just owning the infrastructure alone, I don't think is going to get us to the point where we're truly operating the railroads as a public utility, as a public service, and being able to guarantee both the high quality service to customers that might want to ship by rail, but who aren't given the quality of service or reliability from the class 1s to ship by rail right now, and are sort of forced to take trucks or other means of transportation that might be worse for the environment, or more expensive, leading to higher costs for consumers. And so that's potentially one of the benefits of taking the whole system as a public utility. But it's certainly something that continues to be debated and discussed.
When you kind of step back and take a look at rails in the context of the broader transportation system, they really are kind of uniquely privatized, right? I mean, the highways are owned by the government. The FAA is government run and oversees like flights and things like this, and there's a lot of government involvement there. And yet the rails, the actual infrastructure is privately owned. And then also the companies that operate on top of them are privately owned. It's actually even out of step with the kind of modus operandi of even capitalist America, much less, other countries. And so I guess, maybe a good place to to dive into would be you have a section on the history of public rail in America. And so how did it happen that the rail system is so uniquely privatized, even in a country like America where lots of politicians love privatization? How is it that so many other parts of our transportation system are actually under public control and the rails are not?
Sure. So, I mean, sort of the two parts of that question being the situation of the railroad and the situation elsewhere. At the end of the day, very few transportation systems make a profit on their own. And so as a result, you have to have subsidies somewhere in the system in order to have a reliable, robust transportation network. And that's meant our inland waterways, which, like railroads and roads before them, when they had no competition, could make a decent profit moving freight, say on the Erie Canal. But then railroads came along and took a lot of that business. But there's still people relying on those inland waterways, so the government maintains them at this point, so that is an option for people who don't have a link to a railroad or can't ship by truck. And a similar situation, of course, in the highways. Highways themselves do not fund operations. At one point, they were funded by the Highway Trust Fund, but now they have to take a lot of money from the general fund in Congress in order to pay for their expenses, because we haven't raised the gas tax or any other means of paying into the Highway Trust Fund in decades. But it's still a critical service and needs provisioned. And if we were just having a bunch of private highways around the country, we wouldn't have this sort of common carrier sense where everyone has access to use this infrastructure, which is necessary because so many people are trying to use it. And if we had a system of 400 different toll roads across the country, nobody would ever get anywhere because they'd just be paying tolls every 5 feet. But the railroads are a slightly different situation. And you brought up sort of the general pastiche of American capitalism. Railroads are interesting because a lot of people point to the fact that they actually predate capitalism in a way, going back to the 1830s, before really the Industrial Revolution took place and sort of industrial capitalism rose in this country. The very first large enterprises were trustified railroads. And of course, in the early days, there was no capital. The private investors weren't interested in railroads because they saw them as too risky. Ironically, of course, capitalists who very frequently portray themselves as deserving of profits because they take risks were not willing to take risks on a new mode of transportation back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s in the 19th century. And so state governments and municipalities funded those early railroads. But once it was seen that railroads were a profitable means of transportation, there was pressure to privatize those that were publicly owned. And it began to attract more investment for private operations. The other aspect of this is that Congress made a very conscious decision not to directly build and operate the public rail system in the 19th century, and instead gave away more than 139 million acres of public land to private corporations on the condition they build railroads. So they got a bunch of free land, they got government subsidies, and they built the transcontinental railroads and the Illinois Central going down the middle of the country. And so not exactly free from government intervention, but because the government chose to give this land to private corporations as an incentive to construct the railroads, they then could very cheaply build them privately, and they've remained held privately ever since. To a large degree, except of course for those abandonments, a lot of public passenger infrastructure exists. And then you get into the 20th century, and then you have the issues with the highway system comes into place, and you see a lot more competition with trucks, and railroads start failing and going bankrupt. And at that point, you see sort of a resurgence of some public ownership of rail infrastructure because they try to shed some of their unprofitable or less profitable routes so that the bones of what remains is an uber profitable set of main lines that they can invest the bare minimum in and suck cash out of.
And so, so there are some public rails, but they keep the private companies have kept the super really profitable rail lines. Is that right?
In general, yeah, there are certain high density freight routes that happen to be publicly owned, but those tend to be ones that were constructed by state governments back in the 19th century, and they've just held on to them till this day. For example, in Georgia, the Western Atlantic Railroad goes between Chattanooga and Atlanta, owned by the state of Georgia, leased to CSX, and then the North Carolina Railroad, which runs along the bones of all the major cities in North Carolina, Greensboro, Raleigh, Durham. That's also owned by the state of North Carolina, but these date back for a long time, and they've been leased for operations to the Class 1s.
Gotcha. And so, so we have an extremely privatized transportation system in rail, arguably the most privatized transportation system in the United States, certainly one of the most privatized rail systems in the world. And so if you're a lover of capitalism and you think the profit motive is great and always has great outcomes when it's pursued, the anticipation that I think that a lot of people would have is that our rail system is the best, actually. The rails are the best transportation system in the country because they're the most privatized, and our rail system is the best rail system in the world because of how privatized it is. And so, is that what your report found? Did you find that the rails operate very well? They're very efficient. They they have adequate profits. They're great for the communities. They're great for the workers. They're great for the customers. Everything's great. Is that what's going on?
That's what the Association of American Railroads would have you believe. The sort of the lobbying arm for the rail industry. They like to point that we have the most productive railroads in the world. Essentially means we have the most exploitation of workers on any railroad system in the world. They've achieved this world-leading productivity by laying off massive amounts of workers and by cutting service to any community they can that they don't find to be a high enough profit margin. And so the U.S. may have on paper some very good statistics, but once you peel back the cover of what that means, it means that they have abandoned service to so many rural communities around the country, and even to small cities and towns that once got a lot of rail service. You're not seeing that anymore because they've decided to concentrate on essentially becoming conveyor belts from coast to coast for intermodal containers and coal. Even Baltimore lost an intermodal terminal back in 2018 when CSX was going into precision schedule railroading because they decided, well, they can just drive an extra couple 100 miles and pick up their containers by truck, which of course means people don't ship by rail because at that point, why not leave it on truck for a longer distance? You've also got the question of actual freight carried. It's pointed out that we have some of the highest freight haulage by any rail system in the world. It's a bit of a mixed bag because you look at it and our ton mileage is fairly high, but it has a lot to do with the distances that things are traveling. And we're not shipping a lot of freight that could be shipped by rail. It's going to trucks because of inconsistent service. We're shipping about the same tonnage annually as Indian Railways, and we're doing it, of course, over slightly longer distances. But does that mean that our rail system is necessarily better or worse? Not necessarily. As far as service quality, I think that the STB, Service Transportation Board hearings in 2022 were very revelatory on this fact. The Association of Sandstone and Gravel producers gave a comment that rail service is the worst that it has ever been. And I've had the privilege to talk with some shippers and, of course, read all of this testimony for the STB. And they talk about the fact that they sign contracts with the Class 1s that say, we're going to get switching service. They're going to deliver cars and they're going to pick up cars loaded with our cargo from our siding at our factory 7 days a week. But the railroads have decided that they just don't want to do that anymore. They've laid off so many people, they don't actually have folks to run those those trains, or they just don't feel like running them because they decided it's not quite profitable enough, even though it's still often cases, it's still profitable traffic. They're just not pursuing it. And so they'll say, okay, we're actually coming 2 days a week, and they won't tell folks when they're coming until the day of, in some cases. And this leads to dramatic amounts of instability for people that rely on rail. A lot of manufacturers and farmers are struggling these days to get rail service. And it ends up hurting the American economy and workers who depend on that rail shipment for their jobs. If you're not getting a delivery at the factory, there's no work to do at the factory. And that's the situation the railroads have left us in. On the other hand, they're making a lot of money. They've done this by focusing only on the most profitable routes and the most profitable traffic at the expense of all the slightly lower margin traffic that they might be moving, and underinvesting in infrastructure so that they can take all of those profits and they can suck it out of the industry and give it back to their shareholders in the form of dividends and buybacks. One of the figures I point to in the report is that Union Pacific and Canadian National, two Class 1 railroads, in 2022, if you look at their annual reports, they spent 3 times as much on dividends and buybacks as they did on capacity expansion, infrastructure maintenance, and equipment maintenance combined.
Wow.
And so, sure, most profitable railroads in the world, but are they the best? I think that most stakeholders would say no.
And what about you're working for you did this report for Railroad Workers United. I'm not exactly sure what the relationship is of you to that organization, but what is the how has this organization of rail transportation treated working people, specifically those who work for the rails?
This gets into a much longer conversation than I think we have time to today.
I thought it was going to be very quick. I figured you just told me these are the most profitable rail companies in the world, and so I've been told reliably from reliable sources that this always trickles down to people, right? If you give tax cuts, then the owner's beneficence will increase wages and things like this. I figured that would be a very short statement.
Yeah, I think that the trickle-down effect is true in this circumstance if what you're talking about is job cuts, in that the profitability trickles down to furloughs and layoffs. We've lost one of the figures, if you want to really compartmentalize the issue of the rail industry, that I can point to is that since 2000, we've had a 30% drop in carloads carried by rail. Since 2013 until 2022, we've seen a 30% cut in rail workers employed in the industry, and we've seen a 30% rise in the accident rate among railroads. And so that's not only threatening workers, but it's also threatening community live alongside these rail lines. But when you have a 30% cut in all employment in an industry, you have a massive speed up, and you don't have enough people to do the jobs properly. And so now you've got 40% of all locomotive engineers and conductors report being highly fatigued, according to an FRA study. And that's highly fatigued. That's not all fatigued workers. This is of the group surveyed by the FRA that meets some legal standard set by a federal agency for highly fatigued. And you have people now who might have, back when there was fuller staffing on the railroad, been able to bid for and get a regular job operating a local train, where they would be able to go home to their family. They would know they have a regular schedule each week. People are longer and longer staying on what's called the extra board, where they don't know which train they're working any given day until they get a call 2 hours ahead of time. So that might be at 3 a.m., might be at 9 p.m. And so you have a very irregular work schedule. And then you're working long shifts, often with inconsistent replacement crews coming. And these longer and longer trains are unwieldy, and you still have the same number of people crewing them, but the railroads are still trying to push for one-person train operations, which would leave one engineer with no second pair of eyes or anyone to go check issues on the train when something comes into appearance. And that's already scary enough with the job cuts that we've seen. In other crafts on the railroad, you have carmen and machinists who work on locomotives and engineers and engines who are vastly understaffed, dealing with maintaining the same number of locomotives and cars, but with maybe a third or more fewer people. And as a result, you've got rail companies essentially telling workers, don't actually do the inspection that you're supposed to do. Don't do the job we trained you to do. We're not in the business of fixing rail cars. We're in the business of moving freight. And a consequence of this is you see that when the FRA inspects Union Pacific's equipment, 72% of their locomotives have federal defects. 25% of the cars on the train that derailed in East Palestine, Ohio, had federal defects. And this has a terrible impact on both workers' health because they're having to work faster and faster pace. They're working more and more forced overtime because the railroads don't have enough staffing to actually do their jobs properly with enough people. But they're being sped up and then told at the end of the day when they thought they were going to be able to go pick up their child, oh, you have to stay on for another 12-hour shift overnight. And they have little to no say in that. So it's turned what used to be a very good union job with decent pay and benefits into somewhat of a nightmare.
And so, so there are several other arguments for increased or for public rail and the use of the rail system, and some of those have to do with the environment and the communities and you mentioned traffic congestion and things like this, and getting basically moving some of the transportation from like 18-wheelers to rails. What would, talk to us about some of those things? Like, what would be the advantage theoretically if we were able to move more transportation from the roads to the rails? What would be some of the advantages? And then how could we make that happen?
Sure. So one of the key advantages of getting trucks off the road is that the amount of damage that a vehicle does to a road surface increases exponentially with its weight. And so trucks do a lot more damage to road surfaces than cars do. And we have the potential to move a lot of the traffic that currently travels by truck, move that onto trains, which would get trucks off the road, which would reduce greenhouse gas emissions, would reduce congestion on key corridors, but potentially also provide some more stability to truck drivers if we have the core of the long distance routes across this country going by rail. Then people can pick up and deliver at the endpoints by truck, and they also would get more ability to have sort of time with their families and at home, and a better work-life balance. But the other aspect of this is reducing the amount of money that we have to spend on our highways would save a lot of public funds that are currently being spent on maintaining bridges, especially as we shift to EVs and heavier vehicles writ large. Getting some of that weight off the road will save tens of millions to hundreds of millions of dollars in maintenance every year. At the same time, both reducing those carbon emissions has the impact of hopefully softening the blow of climate change. But also investing in freight will reduce the footprint of the road widenings that keep happening across this country that don't reduce congestion, but they destroy neighborhoods. And so you can move freight a lot more efficiently by rail within sort of a much smaller 50-foot wide space in two tracks than you could with a 400-foot wide highway. It's still a higher throughput. Not to say anything of the additional benefits of we could provide better passenger service if we're actually investing in infrastructure. And the impact on communities is both reducing the pollution coming from trucking and the congestion that comes from an over-reliance on trucking in many communities, but also the emissions and the pollution that come from diesel locomotives. We can see that there's been a push over time to reduce the nitrous oxide and particulate matter emissions from trucks. The EPA has promulgated rules that require a higher tier of emission standards for locomotives, but the railroads haven't been investing in those. And over the period between 2017 and 2020, they actually have shifted to dirtier, more polluting locomotives in their rail yards, which for both the rail workers who work in and around these locomotives every day and for the communities that are living near them, we see up to 10 times higher risks of cancer and other lung diseases and health impacts that are coming from the fact that we are choosing, or the class ones are actively choosing to continue to use these locomotives rather than considering serious solutions like catenary electrification. Every other country in the world that is thinking about electrification seriously right now is thinking about catenary and putting up electrification that will decarbonize the rail system, which on its own is not a huge change in emissions, but electric locomotives are 30% cheaper to operate and maintain and purchase. They accelerate and decelerate faster. It allows us to run much faster, more frequent passenger service on corridors. And so there's a bunch of other ancillary benefits that would lead to a mode shift of we can run trains more efficiently, and then we can get trains to serve more customers when that can be done at a lower cost because we have eliminated the fuel expenses that are a significant portion of operating costs for trains right now. But it also gets back to we're going to, in this regime of precision scheduled railroading, we're no longer going to abandon rural communities and small shippers and instead be able to actually serve them with local trains and end-to-end rail shipping. These are things that you'd think would be possible under our current rail system, but the class ones have no desire to go after even low margin profitable traffic, to say nothing of sort of at cost traffic that might be able to be served under a public system and shift some of that back to rail, which would have all the benefits I mentioned above, but also create tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of jobs, both in constructing and maintaining additional rail infrastructure to have that capacity, but also to operate those trains and maintain them.
And so, I think you're making a good case that we should be moving more things to, more transportation to the rails. Made a very strong case that the private ownership of the rails has not been very effective, and so then the question becomes: what are some of the best avenues available to move to a more nationalized system of rail ownership, and what are some of the various options available to us? You spoke earlier in the conversation about, the idea that we should just own the tracks versus maybe we should own the tracks and the operators, what does the path look like and what are some potential destinations?
So there's a variety of routes. And of course, I think multiple avenues are worth exploring. The sort of shameless plug for the campaign is that we need folks to get involved in public rail now. And we want to build a movement that can actually shift the dialogue on a national level, to start thinking about our rail system, why it's so broken, what it could look like under public ownership, and begin to build that pressure and that momentum to eventually have a fully publicly owned rail system. But some of the more technical avenues for doing that, there is the option of just buy them out. It's been proposed before. It's not cheap, but issuing federal debt at fairly low interest rates, with the amount of profit these railroads rake in right now, we could pay off the cost of purchasing them within 10 to 20 years. And then we would have a debt-free, publicly owned rail system with all of the equipment, all of the tracks. There's also the sort of state-by-state approach. We currently see, say, the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority has been buying trackage from Norfolk Southern CSX so that they can create their own dedicated rights-of-way and tracks along freight rights-of-way that just serve passengers so that they can run more frequent passenger service. is a good approach for a lot of places that have commuter rail or passenger rail already or are interested in running it is buying out the rails, and then leveraging some of the public assets we already have. The Huey P. Long Bridge in New Orleans, owned by the Public Belt Railway of New Orleans, publicly owned. I've seen statistics that it carries 1/3 of the east-west rail traffic in the United States. It maybe as a condition of operating over that bridge, we start putting more pressure on the railroads to act as better members of the community, treat their workers better. Similarly, the Moffett Tunnel out in the west, owned by the state of Colorado, operated by Union Pacific. The lease comes up in just a few short months, and once that lease runs out, it needs to be renegotiated. Maybe conditions as a part of that can have to do with sort of the better operations on the part of Union Pacific. And in addition to purchasing state by state, one of the angles that I'm very interested in, and certainly we need more legal minds thinking about and analyzing, is that I mentioned the land grants earlier. The land grants, the actual land that was given away acre by acre in a checkerboard pattern on either side of the railroad was given away and then sold by the railroads. But a close reading of the land grants has been suggested by a few scholars that the actual rights of way that the tracks operate over are easements given by the federal government, that the federal government never transferred the title to the private railroads. And so with that in mind, and the fact that Congress explicitly said in each of the land grant acts that they have the right to amend, repeal, add to these grants at any point, we could pressure Congress into amending the land grant, say that they've broken the public trust. The railroads no longer serve the public interest like they were supposed to when this land was given to them by Congress. And we could grant that easement instead to a public corporation. Whether that would immediately mean operations publicly, or if it would just mean in the meantime that some sort of lease that brings in a lot of revenue to fund other public rail operations, is up for more discussion. Sort of depends on what the situation is at the moment. But many of the large high density Western rail lines, and even some of them in the middle of the country and even Florida inexplicably, were land grants from the federal government to some extent, and still is public land underlying that rail infrastructure. So that's one angle that we could leverage to take our railroads back.
All right. Maddox, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Adam, do you have anything?
No, I really enjoyed that. I appreciate you breaking it down, and I think you made a really compelling case. And, as someone who thinks that we are really missing a lot of opportunities with trains and the rail system in this country, compared to so many others, I really appreciate what you're doing. And I appreciate the campaign from Rail Workers United. If you could just plug that one more time for folks who are interested in getting more involved in this.
Sure. So Railroad Workers United, sort of one of the groups that kicked off this campaign. It's a cross-craft caucus of rail workers. Go to their website, railroadworkersunited.com. If you're interested in supporting Railroad Workers United, you can donate. You can actually join as a solidarity member. If you're not a rail worker, join as a full voting member if you are a rail worker. And then the campaign is now larger than Railroad Workers United. It also includes United Electrical Workers, which has declared for public rail ownership, and a number of other groups that have gotten together and decided this is the way forward. And so you can join our movement. You can donate. You can get involved. If you go to our website, publicrailnow.org, there is a banner at the top of the screen. You can click it. It'll send you to a form to get involved. Fill that out. You can check box. Our organizer, Adam Barrington, will get in contact with you, talk to you about how public rail might impact you, current impacts in your community from rail, and how you want to get involved with the movement. And so we'd love you to reach out, get involved, support us, give your time, donate, just give us a follow on social media. We're at Public Rail Now pretty much everywhere. And stay tuned. We'll be doing more events all around the country, and this certainly is the beginning of the campaign, not the end.
All right, Maddock Thomas. The paper is called Putting America Back on Track, the case for a 21st century public rail system. You can read the full 110-page report. You should put it out like a book or something. You should make a book of it. And you can find it on railroadworkersunited.org. Maddock, thanks again. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yep. All right. So, we're going to be talking to Alexander Edward here in a minute, but we're going to talk about the Sean O'Brien stuff here quickly before that. So, Sean O'Brien, the international president of the Teamsters, he something that people don't really understand about him and haven't understood about him since he was elected is that he was not a reformer. He was not a reformer. He was not a member of the Teamsters for a Democratic Union. He never was. In fact, he was always very antagonistic to the Teamsters for a Democratic Union. So antagonistic, in fact, that he that there were charges brought against him within the union of his abuse of some TDU members and physical threats of violence against some TDU members is my recollection. And so their marriage, the marriage of the TDU to Sean O'Brien, was something of an odd marriage. But what happened was that, Sean O'Brien kind of saw the way that the winds were blowing. He knew that, that Jimmy Hoffa Jr. was in, kind of dire straits after overriding the vote of the contract, in the contract negotiations right before that election that happened in 2022, I believe it was, is when Sean O'Brien was elected. And so Jimmy Hoffa Jr. was in such dire straits, in fact, that he did not run. He appointed a successor, basically, to run in his stead and be, the legacy of, that kind of grouping of Teamsters officials, kind of the old guard. And so I think Verma was his name. And so Sean O'Brien and also I think, to be fair, I do think that Sean was also upset at the negotiations at UPS under Jimmy Hoffa Jr. I think that there was some kind of like Sean Fain kind of thing that he felt like that it was just too much. There was too much being given away at the table and really for nothing. And so Sean O'Brien was, not happy with this, and he had some ambitions, and he saw an opening, and so he partnered with the Teamsters for a Democratic Union and ran against the Jimmy Hoffa Jr. Successor and won, pretty handily, actually, more handily than Sean Fain did. Sean Fain's election was actually rather close. I don't think that Sean O'Brien's was. It's been a minute since I've looked at the results. But so, I think if you understand that, I do think that while still very confusing, his actions over the last few months become a little bit less confusing. He was never, kind of a dyed-in-the-wool, true blue reformer. He was, part of the old guard, pretty decidedly, and he still wasn't happy with it. And so, with that context, Sean O'Brien spoke to the Republican National Convention on day one, and the day one of the Republican National Convention was a very strange kind of affair. There was a pro-abortion sex worker who spoke. There was a Teamsters union leader. There were rappers. It was just a very kind of bizarre assortment of people at a RNC event, and he spoke, and some of the speech was fine. It wasn't, it was too nationalistic for me, frankly, the whole thing, but there were some good stuff in there. And, the thing that is telling about the audience is that, and there was a lot of not good stuff in there. And so the not good stuff is actually what got huge applauses from the audience. And the things that were good, like when he was lambasting Amazon, when he was lambasting right to work, when he was saying that labor laws in this country are too weak, that it's not fair that companies can just fire workers without any real penalty. when he was talking about those things, the audience was either silent or confusedly kind of a little bit clapping, right? But when he threw some red meat out there, like talking about how he was getting criticism from both the right and the left. Oh no! And he threw it out there for them to boo at the left, who were instrumental in getting him to the presidency of the Teamsters. If we're thinking about the left wing of the Teamsters, the TDU certainly have occupied that space, at least in the past. So that was gross. It was also gross the amount of credit that he gave J.D. Vance and Josh Hawley for some of their quote-unquote pro-labor moves. And also, when he did, any criticism that he had of the Republicans was couched in this both sides kind of stuff. He never singled out any the Republicans as a whole or any single Republican for criticism. Never once did that. And that's just really kind of not acceptable, I don't think, if you are going to be, trying to educate people about what's going on. For the Butch Lewis Act, $40 billion for Teamster pensions, just for the Teamster pensions. It was more than that, but the other payments were kind of dispersed. But $40 billion for Teamster pensions, not a single member of the Republican caucus in the Senate voted for it. Not a single one. Not Josh Hawley. None of them. None of these people voted for it. The Warehouse Worker Protection Act. No Republican sponsors, including Josh Hawley. Josh Hawley is not a sponsor of the Warehouse Worker Protection Act. And, J.D. Vance, there was a potential Kroger strike, or maybe there was a Kroger strike. I'm having trouble remembering it at this time, but there were people that were asking him about it, and he refused to comment on it. He wasn't interested in supporting workers in his state, in Ohio, who worked for Kroger, because he didn't really see them as the white, construction hard hat wearing types that he's interested in being perceived as supporting. And so, it's just not good political education. The speech itself was not. And so then you kind of have to think a little bit about the justifications for the speech, like why was he doing it? And I have always been, I'm probably one of the more sympathetic people that you could get to this idea about speaking at the RNC. I think in particular because it was my idea to have this radio program on a conservative radio station, right? And so I understand the premise of wanting to speak to, being willing to speak to anybody. And I'm willing to speak to anybody, basically, right? I'm willing to go on and talk on any show or to any person on any platform and whatever. But you do have to think about why people are inviting you there and what they are expecting you to say. And then you have to think about what you are saying and what is the effect of what you're saying. And there was a local union president that reached out to me that told me that he had members coming up to him, asking him questions, not a Teamster, asking him questions about the Sean O'Brien speech with basically kind of the implication that, are Republicans moving towards unions? Are Republicans maybe better for unions or something close to as good for unions as Democrats are? Is there really a genuine realignment happening? And that is the effect. That's the effect, right? Nobody is coming away from Sean O'Brien's speech understanding that not a single Republican supported pensions for Teamsters. Not a single person is going to come away from that speech understanding that. Not a single person is going to come away from that speech, understanding that Republicans don't support the Warehouse Worker Protection Act. They're not going to understand that none of them support the PRO Act. That J.D. Vance actually specifically said the reason that I'm not going to support the PRO Act is because unions support Democrats too much. And it's like, well, that's why, right? That's why. We can say we like it or we don't, or we agree with it or we don't. But the reason that unions primarily support Democrats is not because unions just love Democrats. It's because, or union members love them. It's because Republicans want to destroy unions. The vast majority of them, basically all of them, want to destroy unions. They want to destroy us. And so nobody's going to come away from Sean O'Brien's speech understanding that. It's just not something that they would come away understanding. And actually what the effect is, I think, is beneficial for Trump and the RNC and their appeals to unions and working people and labor specifically, but not on any material basis. Mm-hmm. It's not on any. They're not promising to do anything real. They're not. There's no promises. And in fact, also in his speech, something that I was looking for, something that I was hoping to hear, was laying out a program under which that people must minimally meet to get a Teamsters endorsement. And there was not a single red line that Sean O'Brien had. There was nothing. There was nothing saying that we will not endorse people who don't support the PRO Act. We will not endorse people who don't do this or that or the other thing. He had a litany of like some good things and some not good things, but there were no red lines. There was no program for getting the support of the Teamsters. It was really, really, it was really disappointing. It was really disappointing. And in the fallout of that, this is even more disappointing. In the fallout of that, Rick Smith, who is another union radio host, and he has a much bigger audience than we do. He has a much bigger audience than us. I think he's on the radio in like New York and LA and places like that. He speaks to, he has and he's on TV, he's on like cable television. And he's been critical of Sean O'Brien's overtures to Donald Trump, publicly. But, it's been like a respectful disagreement. He's just been laying out that I disagree with Sean O'Brien's political positioning here. And Rick Smith, it is also worth noting, is a working Teamster. He is not a full-time radio pro. He does the show like we do. He's a working Teamster. He still drives a truck. And then in the afternoons, he does a daily radio program, which is, really just kind of awesome. And it's a crime, frankly, that no union or no grouping of unions has been willing to basically write him $100,000 check so that he can do it full time, given the amount of success that he's seen. Because it really is like far and away above what we've been able to do here. And so it's just really, he does a really good thing. I disagree with him. I think some politically, I think he's like kind of like an MSNBC kind of lib kind of thing, but that's fine. People, I'm fine having political disagreements with people and recognizing their value. Rick Smith I believe, does a valuable thing. Well, the Teamsters have ended their almost 20-year sponsorship of the Rick Smith Show.
Oh, I see.
Teamsters have been sponsoring the Rick Smith Show for 20 years. 19 years. And now they're not. Because Rick Smith disagreed with his international president. And before the move was actually made to pull the sponsorship of the Teamsters from the Rick Smith Show, Sean O'Brien did publicly threaten this implicitly. He said that, Rick Smith needs to publicly apologize or, quote, risk his good standing with his union or risk his positive relationship with his union, which is just a really kind of gross thing to say, I think. And so that's what's happened. And it's also, worth pointing out that this is just a complete 180-degree reversal of where Sean O'Brien was like 6 years ago. Back in 2018, Sean O'Brien wrote on Facebook, quote, "Make no mistake, Trump is our enemy. We must take our partisan emotions out of it and look at the man's actions.
Trump supports national right to work. His NLRB has waged a war on policies protecting organizing, collective bargaining, and they have rewritten labor law in favor of employers. Like Obama, the job growth that Trump brags about is in the low-wage service sector or gig economy, and his tax bill was simply a $1 trillion gift to corporations. A war is being waged on workers, and Hoffa is not only refusing to fight, he won't even answer the bell. So here he is criticizing Hoffa Jr. not for playing footsie with Trump, not for being like nicey nice, not for speaking at the RNC, but just not fighting loudly enough.
Right.
Going back to his Facebook post, Teamsters should never be divided by what party or candidate we as individuals support. Here's another thing. He's taking they're stopping the sponsorship of Rick Smith despite his stated position that Teamsters should never be divided by what party or candidate we as individuals support. Rick Smith should be able to have a different position on whether or not we should play footsie with Donald Trump and the Republicans and still be able to stay in good standing of the Teamsters. It should be about who supports us. Teamster members deserve better. We deserve better. Now he's referring again to Hoffa. We deserve better than Hoffa. We refuse to remain silent as Trump dismantles all we have fought for. Real Teamsters aren't scared to speak up, and they aren't scared of a fight. Yeah. And speaking of not being scared of a fight, y'all may remember Mullen, Markwayne Mullen, how Sean O'Brien in the Senate chambers was, pretending like he was getting ready to fight Markwayne Mullen. And at the time, that's not something I would do. I do think it's beneath the dignity of the office for both of them. And I think it's kind of immature and whatever. But, if you're going to do that, you have to stick by it. You can't back off. Or you cannot be the first one to back off. And yet, he was. Here's from The Hill, an interview with Markwayne Mullen, recounting the call with Trump. Trump called Markwayne Mullen. Mullen said the former president told him, "Hey, I just met with Sean," speaking about Sean O'Brien from the Teamsters. "I'd like for you to meet." His point was he'd like to bring the unions, the Teamsters, into the Republican Party. This is the assertion that Mullen is saying that Trump is saying about what Sean told him. So, we're like three or four degrees of separation from this comment, but that's not great. Mullen is asserting that Trump asserted to Mullen that Sean O'Brien says, "I would like to bring the Teamsters and the unions into the Republican Party." So anyway, back to Trump's quote. "And so Sean and I worked out a deal to go sit down at a restaurant," he said. He added, "When they did meet, O'Brien stood up and apologized." The Hill has reached out to the union for comment. Quote, he said, this is Mullen again, saying, Sean O'Brien said, "Out of all the people that I should have read their bio on, I should have read yours, and I didn't," because Markwayne Mullen is a former MMA fighter. Mullen said, "And I found it humorous, and we sat down and we had a great 2-hour conversation. Since then, him and I have talked very often. He's a workout fanatic. He's a guy that pulled himself up from his own bootstraps and grew up in a blue-collar household." And so, what's the word? Defenestrating. Is that a word? Really just beta behavior here from Sean O'Brien, unfortunately, with Markwayne Mullen, being the first one to apologize. And after this whole thing, it's just, really, really, really kind of sad and embarrassing. I would be very embarrassed if I were Sean O'Brien with this behavior. And then finally, the last thing that I wanted to say about the Teamsters, and then we'll bring on Alex, is that after all of this, Sean O'Brien spoke at the RNC. There was a lot of political fallout from that. He's apologized, said, "I'm so sorry. I should have saw that you were an MMA fighter," to Markwayne Mullen. All of this kind of stuff. John Palmer has announced that he is running for general president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. He wrote in a public statement on Twitter saying, "Dear Teamsters, sisters and brothers, having experienced 2.5 years of General President Sean O'Brien's tumultuous presidency, I am announcing my candidacy for a Teamsters national office in the 2026 election for officers. I invite all Teamsters to join with me in forming an opposition slate to send Sean O'Brien back to the truck.
Let's put an end to the false promises, business-friendly unionism, and concessionary backroom deals. And he also excoriates in this statement the TDU, saying that the administration rode into power on a wave of excitement generated by our members' desires and frustrations. We were promised a more engaged leadership and a more militant union. What we have received so far is a PR blast furnace of misinformation and betrayal. The coalition created between TDU reformers and old guard officials has in effect bought off opposition by handing a few cushy jobs to some TDU members at the Marble Palace. This coalition has successfully silenced all criticism from these so-called reformers. Fear of retaliation rules the day at local unions across the country. Leaders fear trusteeships if they fall out of line, and O'Brien's attacks on dissenters are well known. He has threatened and continues to threaten members of his own General Executive Board.
Well, I guess the Valley Labor Report's not getting a check from the Teamsters.
We're probably not going to be getting... Yeah, if Rick Smith's not getting sponsored by the Teamsters anymore, I guess we aren't either, which is, which is a shame. Like,
I do have to say, it really pisses me off when I hear reports of union leaders cracking down on dissent.
Yeah.
The thing about our unions is that they should be democratic institutions. And I get that there's a certain amount of respect that you pay to the office, but at the same time, we have to have room for disagreement and dissent within our unions. That's really, really important. And so, I see both sides of this. Like earlier, we talked about the situation with Shawn Fain and, how he was elected on a slate of reform. And so some of the old guard has to go, right? At the same time, there has to be room for disagreement, right? And so if there are UAW members who are disagreeing with whatever Shawn Fain is doing, either from the right or from the left, they should have the right to voice those opinions free of retaliation. And that goes for any union, as far as I'm concerned. Teamsters, anyone else, union members should have the right to voice their opinions, feel the way they want to feel about their officers and leaders, and be able to organize around that. And it's really disappointing. So
yeah, I agree, and it really is disappointing. I said when some of this was first made public about Sean O'Brien threatening Rick Smith, I said that it really is one of the absurdities of the labor movement, because Sean O'Brien's not the only one. The labor movement is a movement whose driving force is democracy and freedom from industrial tyrants. One of the absurdities about that movement is that a lot of people at the top actually demand 100% loyalty, and when they don't get it, they will even do damage to themselves and their unions to punish dissenters.
Yes.
Do
we have stories on that.
Yeah.
But we have callers on the line, so we'll keep it going.
In my view, that is what I like to call boss shit. And fighting boss shit is why I joined a union. So so there you go. Those are some of my thoughts. We've got Alex in the Zoom, and we have a caller on the line. So we're going to take the caller. We're going to be really quick with the caller. We'll keep it to about 5 minutes, and then we'll get to Alex. Appreciate everybody's patience. Caller from a 256 area code. 256 area code. What's your name, and where are you calling from?
Jacob, this is Joe calling from Decatur.
Hey, Joe. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I just wanted to weigh in really quick on ask the question first, and you don't have to call nobody's name, but the local president who was asking you about Sean O'Brien's speech, was he from Alabama?
He was, yeah. It wasn't a Teamsters local, but yeah, it was a person from Alabama, yeah.
Well, I don't know how much he keeps up with the real labor movement in Alabama, but all he's got to do is just look at Alabama's stance on the automatic recognition, and that'll tell you what Republicans think.
The president was coming to me like concerned, right? The president was like understanding and politically sophisticated, and he was like, I have members that are who are, so you have people that are just not as politically sophisticated, and so they only see the headline, they only see kind of the outlines of what's going on, and the outlines and the directional movement of Sean O'Brien's speech at the RNC, I think gives cover to the Republicans, and it kind of obfuscates what's going on. But yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, that's all you have to do, especially if you're from Alabama. You just have to look and see at what they're doing.
Well, the answer you just give me makes plenty of sense. I wasn't necessarily calling the guy out for not knowing what was going on, but if he has to relate that message to his members, probably ought to do that every month at the union meeting, and maybe they'll get the message sooner or later. And I know there's members out there that would like to have an excuse to take up for a Republican. They're out there. I had plenty in my local. They looking for an excuse to take up for them. Really quick, Sean O'Brien, y'all, anytime a local union or a national union gets invited to a meeting from their adversary, generally it's to work off the company's agenda. Never have I been called to a meeting with the company where they was going to call us in there and tell us what a wonderful job our local was doing, making their profits. That never happened. It was always something they wanted, and always detrimental to the workforce every time. Can't remember a time that anybody gave us absolute credit for doing the production that was setting records and stuffing their pockets full of money. That's just John O'Brien should have had better sense. One on going to wrestle with Merlin. Should have had better sense on that, but he sure should have had better sense on going up there and being the court jester for the Republican Party, because that's what it appeared to me. Really quick, Hulk Hogan, fake name.
That's right.
Fake wrestling. I don't even know that an adult voter who was a Hulk fan when they was kids, because that's what WWE really appeals to. Now parents take them to it because their kids want to go, but all that crap is fake, including Hulk Hogan, if you know what I mean, brother. All fake. Kid Rock, watched his little, I don't know what you call it, but Kid Rock is don't even know what to call him, but I don't think that the folks he was entertaining there even understood what he was saying, other than fight and Trump. Last thing, Jacob. Franklin Graham, Billy Graham's son. I don't know what his foundation is. I don't know what his church is. I really struggled with him and his 5-minute speech. Following a shyster like Hulk Hogan, and then making his speech. At no point in time did I ever hear him ask that group to pray for Joe Biden while he's suffering from COVID, which could be fatal for an 81-year-old guy. I did hear him say in his behalf, he did say, pray for the leaders of our country, independent, Democrat, and Republican, but he breezed through that really quick. I didn't understand that. Had he been making the opening statement at the RNC and just asked to pray for the country, blah blah blah, I wouldn't have no problem with it. But I'm trying to get it in my head why he was even there, other than to entertain the evangelicals, and they not a lot of evangelicals at that RNC. In truth, there's not. But I just really didn't understand it. I did look, and this could be bogus numbers, but I did see where his salary, I think, in 2022 was $880,000 a year, which in just a few years it puts him in that millionaire class. So I can see why he leans to the Republican Party. But listen, I know you got a guess. I ain't going to keep you. Got a few more things to say, but we'll weigh in on them at another time. Thanks,
all right,
Jacob.
Brother. We'll look forward to hearing from you again. You have a good one. Yeah, I think that I'm a little bit more maybe sympathetic to wrestling in general than Joe sounds like he is. I think, and I don't think Joe would dispute that it does actually take a lot of athletic kind of. There's a lot of athleticism, even though obviously kind of the matches of the thing are like scripted, and it's like more like theater and opera, than actually a competition kind of thing. But It really is, all of the things that he said about Hulk Hogan are all true, and he's a scab and all of that kind of stuff. The thing about the evangelicals, I think judging by, Grindr, what was it, broke down, or their servers were like crashed is the word. I was forgetting the word. Grindr crashed because there was so much usage in Milwaukee last week.
So now Grindr is the app for gay men.
For gay
correct?
men, yes. For
there was an
homosexual
influx
men. Yes, an influx.
with the RNC. Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. And yes, I also found Franklin Graham's address kind of strange, especially the part, and this was all throughout the convention, all of the stuff about, it being a miracle that Trump survived and all this kind of stuff. And it's just kind of, really bizarre to imagine God like kind of just grabbing the bullet and pushing it towards this, firefighter behind Trump and protecting Trump. That's kind of a strange image of God and priorities that's not what I would have if I were to be a religious person, but nevertheless.
Well, I'll pray for you, Jacob.
Yeah. All right, folks, we have Alex Edwards on the Zoom. Let's go ahead and bring him in. He is a worker at a Barnes & Noble and was fired and was able to get his job back thanks to the Teamsters. Also host of the podcast Minion Death Cult, which is pretty good. So, Alex, welcome to the program. Uh-oh. We still have Alex?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Check.
I can. I can hear you now. Alex, one of the hosts of Minion Death Cult podcast, which is a podcast about your Mima's genocidal Facebook feed. So, Alex,
Correct.
welcome to the
it's
program.
all accurate. Yeah, thanks so much for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I want to talk about your podcast in a little bit, but I don't want to bury the lead. I want to talk about this union story first, because you posted on Twitter that you got your job back after you were fired. And so and you work at Barnes & Noble. And so is the Barnes & Noble you work at unionized with the Teamsters?
Well, what happened was a lot of people saw an initial post and tried to get Barnes & Noble to fire me. The thing is, I think they maybe had the same misunderstanding that you do. Barnes & Noble wasn't my employer. I just had Barnes & Noble in my display name as kind of am I allowed to say a curse word on here?
Yes.
It was sort of a shit post display name that had the phrase Barnes & Noble in it.
Okay.
So I just, I got my job back at a different company, but I wanted everybody to know that also I had officially not been fired by Barnes & Noble. So two victories, technically.
Okay, so we're officially not fired from Barnes & Noble, and we got our job back at another company. Are you able to say the company? Is that
Yeah, I'll say the
something?
company. Yeah, I'm an 18-year employee of UPS, 18-year Teamster. I'm a delivery driver.
Okay, yeah, and that's another thing that I was confused about, because I remember watching some of your stuff around the UPS contract negotiations, and I knew that at least one of you was a UPS Teamster, and I had thought it was you, and so I was like, that's kind of weird that he would have been working for UPS and now he's working for Barnes and Noble, but so okay, so
But I was still on friendly terms with the Teamsters, so they sent the local president and business agent out on my behalf, just as a nice jet. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, no, just to clarify, so people, maybe this helps give some insight. My display name was Barnes and Noble copy of the Beatles 1 on vinyl, which is just a personally funny joke to me, because I was just 10 years ago when I made that display name, I was just trying to think of the most mass-produced piece of vinyl I could. This was before Adele and Taylor Swift, started pressing stuff on vinyl. Anyway, that is just a joke, only funny to me. But I've had it for years, and everybody, when I posted a selfie with a keffiyeh on, and everybody tried to get me fired from both Barnes and Noble and UPS.
And so, were you actually fired or suspended at UPS?
Yeah, I was terminated without progressive discipline, which is the way we're supposed to do things according to the contract. And they fired me. It was all stuff around the keffiyeh. They fired me for stealing time by the Post, which was posted on my unpaid lunch.
Right.
So not their time, my time. And then they fired me for the complaint that came in from not a customer, but a bystander who saw me wearing the keffiyeh en route and wrote in or called in to the company. Again, this is so I want to clarify all this. I don't want anybody to contact UPS. The matter is settled. I got my job back with back pay. I was made whole by it. I accept graciously the ruling. Thank you to the arbitrator. Thank you to the union. Thank you to the customers who supported me. So I don't want any sort of retaliation, and I don't want to, defame UPS. I actually like working for UPS. Yes, most of the reason I like working for UPS is because of the Teamsters union. But it's a job I want to have until I retire. So I just kind of want to tread carefully and not say anything that could get me into trouble per se. But I did want to share, my recollection of events, because I think it's weird and interesting and maybe helpful for some people out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just want to reiterate, no interest in, and no reason to, nothing to be gained from contacting UPS or the Teamsters about this. We are here in a purely celebratory matter. We are here, like you said, accepting graciously the ruling of the arbitrator and and celebrating everything. And so the allegation of the time theft, and then the complaint of just the wearing of the keffiyeh. And the keffiyeh, for those who don't know, is the scarf that is kind of like a Palestinian show of support, right? It's kind of a Palestinian.
Well, it's a Middle Eastern cultural item, that was given to me as a gift. And they tried to imply that I was being divisive. I believe that's the word the company used, by just wearing this scarf that I've had for, over a year, that I had worn en route over a year, that I'd worn into the building, in front of management. But a customer, used a nasty word to describe what the scarf was. I don't really want to repeat it. But from my perspective, it seemed like a very biased individual who I didn't interact with, who admitted in the complaint that they didn't interact with me. I didn't know they were there. I deliver to a very busy city. There's people all around me all the time. So, I wouldn't have noticed them. And they even said in their statement, their complaint, that they never felt afraid of me, but it was implied that if I were to be delivering to a residential area, they would be afraid of me. And I found that disappointing and depressing, because I like to think I carry myself very professionally and friendly, and I have an amazing relationship with the customers on my route. Again, I need to thank the 165 people on my route, actual customers, signed a letter of support attesting to my integrity, like good conduct and professionalism, and as a representation of the company. And I believe that helped my case a lot. And I should say there was a third thing they fired me for, which was disobeying an order or instruction, refusing to work as instructed, essentially. And that instruction was never given. I believe we proved that in the case. And so they tried to say that these three things amounted to what's in the Teamsters contract called a cardinal sin that can result in immediate firing without going through the progressive discipline. And these cardinal sins are explicitly outlined in the contract. They are specific offenses. There's 7 of them. But their argument, the company's argument, was that these 3 other disparate offenses rose to the level, this is the language they used, of a cardinal sin. This is getting really arcane. I hope people aren't super bored by this. But to use that language, they had to compare what I did to some pretty gnarly stuff that other drivers got fired for on the spot. If you can just let your mind run wild, think of bad things you're not supposed to do, both just in society and also as a, while on the clock. And it was just kind of flabbergasting that I was being compared to this sort of stuff. And again, I think that's one of the reasons their case wasn't successful, is because I think they had to, in my opinion, reach pretty far.
Right. And so 2 months, that's still like a reasonably long time. It's not everybody has the ability to kind of survive for 2 months without a paycheck. Although you got back wages, but that's still during that 2 months you weren't. But you weren't getting paid. But that's relatively quick in the terms of the U.S. kind of labor system. And so could you walk us through some of the timeline there? You were this happened and the complaints were filed and you were fired. And then what were some of the next steps and how did all of this progress to? I think it was like yesterday or the day before that you announced that you were rehired.
Yeah. So, and I don't believe I've thanked the Teamsters yet. I am a Teamster, but thank you to Teamster, my local. Thank you to local 174 in Seattle. Thank you to local 63 in Southern California. Without them, I would have been toast. That's, that's, I think, a huge, the customer support, the family support, all of that stuff is also necessary for you to get through. But if you don't have the organized labor, the organized power, nothing like this would have happened. And it's sad to say, it's sad to be celebrating something that other people don't have access to right now. But yes, thank you to the Teamsters. And so the reason it is a quick turnaround, actually, 2 months. Luckily, I have the podcast. We make a little bit of money on Patreon. I was able to pay the mortgage, but it was tight. And yeah, just looking forward, it was like, well, I'm going to have to make drastic life changes if I have to start shopping for a job that's, it's not as good as a package car driver for UPS. So there used to be a far longer arbitration time because they would do the case. It was like they had to schedule. There was some scheduling conflict. So the way they used to rule on cases, because when you go to panel, it's like I don't know if you guys have probably talked about panels on here before, but it's like a Supreme Court or a jury you have to convince. And the quote tie-breaking vote would be the arbitrator. So there's 3 from the union, 3 from the company, 1 arbitrator. So a lot of times you're like me going into this, I was just like, I don't know how bad it seems like the company really wants me gone. I just better hope the arbitrator is going to be cool. It's going to be normal. And so, yeah, that's how that works. But the labor of the arbitrator is pretty intensive because they have to know the contract. They have to be a lawyer. They have to sit in on what my panel was 4 hours. And they're doing that for multiple people. I think they just finished the panel like yesterday or something like that. It goes on for a week or 2 weeks. It used to be like a year. Like they just got somebody in the union was telling me they just got a decision on a panel that happened in July last year So they have reformed the panel system. I don't, it worked out for me. I don't know really necessarily the full shape of the theory of it, but supposedly it's so you can process cases more quickly. You have a sitting arbitrator. And so two months is, a relatively short period of time for that. So I received, I don't want to get into too many details because we'll be here forever. But yeah, I received communication that there had been a complaint made about me. And I was confused because, again, I've been wearing my keffiyeh. I was wearing my keffiyeh en route, and I got compliments on it all the time from like people who knew what a keffiyeh was and people who didn't, and so it's not the first thing that jumped to my mind. And when I found out it was that, I was kind of told, well, you can't wear political items as part of the uniform. And I was like, well, who said anything about politics? I'm not going out talking politics on the route to customers. Like this guy, the person who complained never talked to me at all. They don't know my politics, we're assuming a whole lot actually. So I tried to pursue a religious exemption, and I perhaps did this in the wrong way, by wearing the keffiyeh again without having first secured the religious exemption. And yeah, they took me out of service because the company followed up to quote, make sure I had taken the keffiyeh off. And at the same time, like this post that I made in the keffiyeh was going crazy viral because, people online are crazy. And so I was getting like death threats and stuff, I was getting like people were saying they were going to fight me if they saw me on the street, which is really funny. Because again, a year, nobody ever said anything to me. But anyway, so that all kind of, somebody in the company got really mad, which I get it. You don't want stuff to blow. So I locked down my account. I was like, I don't need any more. I tried to portray myself professionally, but I was like, I don't need this. And yeah, I got taken out of service again without like any discipline. And when you have a contract, like they have to follow the contract. And I'm just lucky, like somebody knew the contract well enough to know that this was a mistake on behalf of the company. And so they interviewed me. And here's the thing, like I have a pretty good relationship with my local management team. And so I wanted to, they fooled me with the good cop stuff. I wanted to be whatever you call it, like compromising. I was like, hey, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to blow up. My bad. And I used like undisciplined language because I've never been a shop steward. I know the contract okay, but I've never been served as a shop steward because I'm really a selfish person. And so I used language that didn't help me later in the panel, if you catch my drift. So one thing to take away perhaps is to remember, and this is something I know, but I just got, my diligence wasn't there. Management, they're a function of the operation, So it doesn't matter if you have a good relationship with them. Are they going to lose their job for you?
Right.
Probably not. Somebody's going to lose their job. You'd rather it not be you,
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And, it is hard in the heat of the moment, right? You may know to be careful and strategic in your language, but in the heat of the moment, especially if it's something like this where you didn't really see it coming necessarily, at least not in this way, so it can be tough for workers put in that situation. But like you said earlier, it's really, really important having the backing of a union, so that folks can actually help you respect your rights and exercise your rights and protect yourself.
Yeah. So, you went through all of this, and the union was able to go through the procedure laid out in the contract, show that management didn't follow the contract. You're able to get your job back. You're able to get back pay. You're reinstated. You're back on the job now. And so this is all, really exciting. And so, yeah, happy to happy to have you on to celebrate that. Appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about it. And so we'll just close with, your podcast, Minion Death Cult, a podcast about your Genocidal Meemaws Facebook feed. Talk to us a little bit more about that. Where can folks find it, and what kind of stuff do y'all talk about, week to week?
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, let's get to the most important part of my appearance, plugging my stuff. Thanks so much, guys, for having me on. Thank you to my family, thank you to the union, thank you to my customers, thank you to Minion Death Cult listeners who, without them, I would have been in much direr straits than I was. I co-host a podcast called Minion Death Cult with my buddy Tony Boswell. We're a comedy politics podcast that studies mostly American politics through the lens of real Americans, by which I mean the Facebook and other social media comment sections. We cover topical news and labor, electoral politics, policing, racial discrimination, vegan menu options, presidential assassinations, libertarian and anarcho-capitalist rap music, all the important stuff. But again, via the Washington Examiner op-ed page or the Epoch Times comment section. We've also watched an Epoch Times movie for the podcast called Interview with the Antichrist, which is phenomenal.
Okay.
Doing the real work there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
awesome. That's awesome.
We'd love to have you guys on. You guys should come on the show.
Yeah,
Happy to,
We'd love to. And I'm just really thinking about those comment sections from the Epoch Times.
I tell you what, though, if that, I do have to admit, I haven't listened to just a whole lot of your stuff. Like, I don't assume that you've listened to a whole lot of mine, and there's a lot of stuff out there, and so that's all okay. But if that's really like a big part of your podcast is like reading comments and stuff, it would be very funny to go through my Uncle Joey's Facebook feed on the Minion
please.
Death
Oh my
Cult
God.
podcast.
Please. Yeah. So if you're looking up the show Minion Death Cult, wherever you get podcasts, all the episode titles are comments from is a comment from that episode.
Okay.
So that's why we look insane online.
Sure.
We did it kind of the hard way. We're just going to put everything, the worst stuff out there. And let people think. Like the cover art is a selfie I found, years and years and years ago, of a guy with like the American flag filter, selfie from his laptop in his bedroom, 55-year-old guy, wearing iodized sunglasses, mustache, goatee. I don't know what his button-up shirt is, but he's got the American flag and the eagle filter over it. And he's just got a giant cross that's like reflecting light. And I think for like the first 5 years, everybody thought that was me.
How long have you been doing the podcast?
We've been doing it for like 7 years now, I think.
Okay.
Long time, yeah.
Yeah, that is a minute. We've only been doing it for 4 years here at the Valley Labor Report.
Wow,
so
seniority, baby.
That's right.
You have to give me your show now.
Yeah, we would. Yeah, that's right. That's how the union contracts work. Is the more senior people get to take over the others' podcasts. So, I'm trying to find a funny one just at the top of my Uncle Joey's feed. I'm not seeing.
We could be onto something though. Yeah. I think some of the comments that we see down here in Alabama, and even just on some of our channels, frankly, we probably could come up with some stuff.
Yeah, here's one of them where he's like, I mean, this is just like from May, right? And so we've all known for years that posting on Facebook does not actually serve as a legal notice, right? I mean, this is. But we've got one of those like, an attorney advised us to post this. The violation of privacy can be punished by law. Anyway, I hereby state I do not give my permission to use any of my personal data or photos. It's like, well, there you go. So you fixed the problem there, Uncle Joe.
Yeah, sovereign social media citizen. Very common on Facebook.
Yeah, that's probably like the third time he's posted that this year, to be honest. But anyway, for
example, anything that happens to you guys personally, talking about labor, I'm sure you've gotten some funny responses to what you're doing. We'd love to talk about those as well. We talk about what happens to us in the real world, like, well, not the real world, still online, but what happens to us personally. Like, I'm going through the episode that we recorded about all the responses to my Kefia selfie, I'm vetting them. I'm handing them over to our lawyers and making sure there's nothing actionable in there that could get me fired again. And then I believe that episode will come out on our Patreon this Wednesday if I can get it up to snuff. But yeah, just incredible stuff. I'm sure, being online long enough, you've had that stuff directed at you before.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some stuff. It would actually surprise you, especially if you knew that we were on a conservative radio station. We're on the same station that Sean Hannity started on, actually, here in Alabama. During the first half of the program, we're not on the radio right now. A recording of this half of the program will play on the radio later in the week, but we'll be able to clean up the curse words and stuff. But anyway, I'm actually surprised at how little hate that we get being on a conservative radio station. But I will say that anytime we talk about, I guess as you know, anytime we talk about like Israel, immigrants, or gay people, in a not conservative way, we get like a dozen people calling the station telling them to get us off the air. Oh,
that's great. Yeah, that would be next week's theme. That would be embedded in next week's theme music if somebody left me a message like that. That's
unfortunately,
honestly,
they don't call us. They call the station, and so the station doesn't record it and send them to us, unfortunately.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah, it is a bummer. We just get texts whenever I just get a text whenever it was apparently like a controversial episode, and the program manager, who's also a conservative but is more like a contrarian and just likes controversy more than anything, he'll text me and say, he'll say, "Hey, everybody hated your show this weekend. Keep it
up." Beautiful.
So, yeah.
We had the Rolling Stone journalist Miles Klee, friend of the show. We've had him maybe twice. I don't remember. Sorry, my memory's awful. But he's written critically of things like the movie The Sound of Freedom, and so he just gets his inbox is just a death threat receptacle now at this point. And so we had him on the show to go through some of the funnier responses that I saw to him. I was like, sorry, we have to reenact all the awful things that are being said to you, but I think they're funny.
Yes, I agree. All right, well, Alexander, appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, folks. Check out Minion Death Cult podcast, and maybe you'll see us on an episode in the future. We'll see.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys.
All right,
appreciate it. Take care.
Yeah, we'll talk soon. All right, ran a little late. Do you want to hit the last segment, or are you good? You want to wrap?
I'm good, man. I think we did it.
All right, we did it. There you go. You heard it from Adam. We did it. We did the thing. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Appreciate everybody's time. If you want to make a one-time or monthly recurring contribution, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate. You can buy our very cool union-made logo caps at tvlr.fm/store. And let us know what your union in the South is up to at tvlr.fm/contact, and we'll include it in our newsletter. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.